back and be able to pull
So
up.
cute.
Turning the video and the audio
I think I
on.
got dragged into doing it.
Usually like when your shoes are
Okay, I call the December 1st meeting of the school committee to order. We are live on RCTV, I believe.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we're live on RCTV. So let me run quickly through the agenda, and then we'll jump in. So we'll open with public comment, the consent agenda, and then do our round robin of reports. In the old business section tonight, we're going to review and approve an update to the district calendar for this school year. We have second readings of policies JFABE and JFABF, which we had first readings of at our prior meeting. And then in the new business section, we've got a good cross-section of our principals here to review and approve the school improvement plans at the elementary and middle school levels. Heather Leonard will be here with, we framed this, or we titled this as a STEM curriculum update, but it's really going to be a math curriculum update tonight. And then we've got a number of policy discussions coming out of the policy subcommittee. So a discussion and vote on revocation of JHBA, and then first readings of updates to 4 policies, JE, JH, JFBAD, and EFDA. And then finally, time allowing, I want to just have a brief discussion amongst us about how we're approaching social media and whether we want to make any tweaks there. So that's our agenda for this evening. We'll start with public comment. If there's anybody who would like to speak on anything that is not on the agenda this evening, I see a whole bunch of people here for the agenda this evening. Okay, good. All right, we'll move to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second,
Any discussion on that before we take a vote?
yes.
Tom has discussion.
Fred.
A couple of, I guess, first is a really exciting one. And then, so first let's highlight the really exciting one. $1.3 million endowment for scholarships.
Correct.
Can you spend a little time just talking about how that came about real quick so people understand that one?
Yeah, so it beat me to it. It's coming in my report. So
It's too late.
it's too late. So here we go. We are thrilled to share that we had a deceased Reading Town member, David Libby, who was in his estate to put in to give $1.3 million towards scholarships at RMHS, which when you put in context, we're giving out on an average about $15,000 a year in scholarships, so now have access to $1.3 million in funds. Is a game changer for our community. It's designated in the estate, it lists for deserving and underprivileged Reading resident and Reading RMHS graduates. And what we're going to, the money right now in the estate will be transferred over, given approval by school committee into a separate and distinct gift account. We'll work with legal counsel to set up some criteria for use of that account, obviously overseen by some sort of committee, and then figure out how those funds are distributed to students starting hopefully this year. Just like to thank, as we move forward, once we learn a little bit more, this kind of came pretty quick to our team over the past couple of weeks. Once we learned a little bit more about David Libby, there's a little bit about him in the packet, but also about his family and the legacy he's hoping to leave. We'd like to do more of a larger thank you and appreciation for this tremendous, this tremendous gift. But in the meantime, tonight, we're just hoping that the committee can approve this so we can have access to the funds, so we can start to set up the criteria and start to get that moving and set for our seniors this year.
And so tonight's just the formality of accepting the donation, and all of that other work will come later.
You don't usually get a lot of emails that say that we have a monetary gift of $1.3 million. So I think we all kind of held on to our seats when we saw that, but it is accurate. It's really, really exciting.
Okay, so a couple other questions. One, I see that we have changed our field trip forms, and we now have clear delineation about whether or not there's financial interest. What I haven't seen in any of those, Tom, is, Dr. Milichewski, is us saying, yes, we're okay with that. Is that pending us saying we're okay with it? Is that what we're expecting? Or is it you saying you've checked it and everything's going to be okay?
Sarah, do you want to share anything about the new?
That's a good
So
question.
Sarah and Jen have both kind of taken the lead in the new field trip form. So if you want to start with
Having
that.
a lot of fun with those. So that's something I think we probably need to follow up on and look into a little bit deeper. From my understanding that that there's 2 forms staff submit. One is the initial form, which indicates that they would have a financial interest in the trip, and they're just disclosing that. And then there's a second form once the trip is solidified and we know the exact amount. So my impression of the scenario is that we are just ensuring that, and that form is properly filled out when they're requesting permission for the slip, for the trip, so that we know that they're going to have this, this benefit to them. Basically, they're having, the trip paid for. Some would say chaperone benefit, but they do need to disclose that.
Okay, so we still have more to come on the second.
We still have more to come, and there is an additional form once the cost of the trip is solidified.
Okay.
Sorry, I should add one more thing. A lot of times, we don't have the full chaperone list until the trip is approved. It's sort of a chicken egg thing
Yep,
where
it
you
is.
need to get the field trip approved before you contract with a company or really reach out to see how many students want to go and then determine the number of chaperones you need. So more to come on that.
Okay. Thank you for the progress in that step as well.
Yeah.
Question number 3, if I still have the floor.
Sure.
Quebec is on here again from a middle school perspective, which I'm happy to see and love to see, especially that we're finally going back. I think we went back last year though, but correct me, no? Okay. What I'd love to see, and looking at the two of you in the audience, is how do we support the Spanish side too? The Spanish trips have been lo and behold, well below the Quebec trip. So I'd love to see us try to figure out what that looks like in the long run. I know Quebec is kind of a draw to get kids to go to the French classes, but I think we also need to make sure we support the Spanish side of it too, and not just by going to some restaurant in some portion of Boston somewhere as the field trip for salsa dancing or something, which has happened with my daughter when she was in 8th grade. So I'd love to see us figure out what that equal draw is and make sure it's aligned appropriately.
Perfect timing, right?
Yep. And number 4, I'm excited to see the HBCU trip as well. Can we clarify the funding source for the $35,000? Is that coming from the METCO budget? And if so, are we also making sure that students that are not Boston-based students are able to attend as well that trip?
I'll speak to that a little bit.
Yes to both. The funding does come from our METCO grant. And once it is approved, our METCO director, Curtis Martin, will be sending out information. We already have a flyer prepared, an enticing flyer. We're sending that out to all of our RMHS students that are in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And then students will be encouraged to sign up and to express interest. And then from there, we'll lottery the students that will attend.
Great.
If you've ever spoke with a student who's done sort of HBCU tours, which I know would be the first here, it is a game-changing and life-changing experience for a lot of students who a lot of students aren't aware of just the opportunities that exist through HBCUs, and that experience of visiting, touring, being around on campuses of students and adults who share a racial identity, I think is just something that is incredibly uplifting and an amazing opportunity for our students. So thank you to Mr. Martin, too, who's not here tonight, for organizing that trip.
Yeah, we'll also be partnering with our guidance department to provide support to the students during the trip in understanding what is it that you look for when you visit a college and helping them figure out what questions they have so that they really make the most of that opportunity.
I guess on that last one, just a point, and I need to go double check it, but we used to have a requirement that nurses went on out-of-state trips. That one says no nurses going. So I just wanted to check on that and make sure we're comfortable with that, and what the impacts of that is if we're not. We have canceled trips in the past because we could not send a nurse with them. In particular, we have canceled DC trips.
So, we just reviewed this policy with Mary Juliana a few weeks ago, and she had that's not required anymore, and she had a rationale for it, and it's escaping me. There is a solution, and I will, I'm sure Dr. Milczewski will find it and share it, but that is something that's been addressed, and that but I can't remember what the backstop was in the cases where that happens, but it is something that came up in a conversation where we discussed the health policy. Yep.
With Dr. Brinchero as well, our school
Right.
physician, too.
Right,
It's
yep.
not just the health policy, there is a field trip policy that's part of. So it used to be, I can double check as we go through the meeting, but it's something just to follow up on and make sure we have coverage of.
That also be a state implication. I think there's a state.
If you're
aspect to
out
it,
of state,
too.
you.
Like, by the state of Massachusetts requires.
Okay,
We can follow up on that.
So provisionally approve it, I suppose, would be.
okay. All right, any other comments on the consent agenda?
I feel silly even speaking because you brought up so substantial. My name is misspelled on page 7. It's important.
I deny the friendly amendment, no.
GAFFI.
Oh, I see it. Under, oh, you know what? All right. Okay, as amended, any other comments? Okay, consent agenda, approving the consent agenda as amended, all in favor? All opposed, and it passes 5-0. We will fix Aaron's name. Okay, reports, Jada.
So as we return back from Thanksgiving break, we've had a pretty busy week at the school. First of all, we'd like to congratulate the drama kids who are putting on a very big production for the musical Scrooge. It starts tomorrow, and we hope that you all will go and see it. And we also had the start of winter sports this week, which has been taking up a lot of most students' time, and that's pretty much what's going on in the school right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Hardy.
Hi, everyone. So I actually have some report items from Dr. Stice, who couldn't be here this evening, so I'll start with her items. She wanted to let everyone know about 2 opportunities from community partners. So Reading Rec is currently sponsoring an event called Special Skates, and this is an event it's a set of skating lessons for children and adults with physical and intellectual challenges. So that's something you can learn more about on the Reading Rec website if you're interested. And one of our other community partners, Communitas, is offering some fun events in December. And so that's something also you can go to the Communitas website to learn more about. And then the final update is just a reminder to folks that the CPAC meeting, the next CPAC meeting, will be on December 20th. And this is a really important meeting. It will be a parent orientation to learn about the special ed and civil rights review that is currently underway with DESE. So there'll be information about that and an opportunity for parents to ask questions, parents and guardians to ask questions. You can get information about this on the CPAC website, and also on that website is a link to the Zoom meeting. From my update, I actually have some exciting news. You may remember just a few meetings ago, Jess Callanan was here to talk with us about the innovation pathway. And this year, as you may remember, we are seeking designation in 2 pathways. At that time, she was just submitting, I think, the Part A, which is the first part of sort of the hurdles that we have to jump through in order to get approved for that designation. We did receive word just this week that our Part A has been approved. We've been invited into the Part B, which is the final application. So we will start work on that right away. Jess has put together an innovation pathway council, a group that is meeting, and that group will put together, it's a pretty substantial lift, the Part B of the application. We have to have that in by February 9th, and then we'll find out from there if we get the designations we're looking for. Most likely, that's going to come with a $25,000 planning grant. We should know about that in a week or so. We're hoping that it does, because that will help to fund the work that we need to do this year to prep for next year. Also, as she had mentioned, more capital skills grant has been announced. So we're currently working right now, like our department heads are working to determine what we want to include in that grant process. So that's exciting. It's a good hurdle to be through. I wanted to just, and you'll hear a little bit about this when the principals present tonight, I just want to kind of give a shout out to our grades 3, 4, and 5 teachers. We've had continuing work with ArtCore, implementation of our new literacy program. And this is intensive coaching that's happening this year, not only when our ArtCore coaches are there in the schools, but really on a daily basis. Our principals are working with their teachers to support this work. And our teachers have just done such an amazing job. It's really a heavy lift for them. We're talking about kind of a 180-degree turn in the instructional practices that they're implementing. And so just that in and of itself is a lot of work. So I just want to give a shout out to them and just say how thrilled we are with the beginning of this implementation. Lots of good work ahead of us still, but off to a good start. And then I do just want to give a shout out to Joshua Eaton. Principal Shelburne invited central office today, and I was able to head over to their Jaguar Jog, yeah, which is a really fun event that's held in the neighborhood just behind JE for grades 3, 4, and 5. And it's an event, kind of a run, kind of like a 5K-ish run. And so I got to run with the 4th graders and the 5th graders, or I should say they like ran ahead of me. They were very fast. And really just everyone had a great time celebrating. There was a lot of school spirit, a lot of support for each other, families out. It was really nice to see families in the neighborhood who don't even have students kind of coming out into the street to cheer on the students and to watch the event. Really a nice community event and a way of, communicating that the school is part of that neighborhood, regardless of if people have students currently attending or not. So thank you to Caitlin, and I'm sure your PTO and lots of other teachers and staff. And Erin, I think you were part of organizing that as well. So, well done.
It was fun to see you running by.
I was like, hey, I know her.
Long-standing tradition there, too.
I participated in it.
You did?
Yeah.
As a student?
My mother still has my 5th grade medal from it.
Love that. That's great. It's awesome. So,
Very good.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Dr. Milczewski.
Great. I just have one quick update. As you know, we had just kind of one lingering piece around for MSBA Phase 1 deliverable. So that was our maintenance and capital planning documentation. That's now been submitted thanks to Joe Huggins and his team, Ms. Batan as well. So all the documentation is now in from Phase 1. In conversation with MSBA, we're hoping and I guess also expecting to be on the agenda for the board on the early March meeting, which I believe is March 2nd. So at that point to officially move forward and do Phase 2 of the process. So obviously an exciting update to get all that, and just appreciate the continued support of the committee, of the community, obviously of town meeting, which I'm sure someone will probably speak to tonight in reports or updates. But we're really excited to move into this next phase of the process.
Very good. Liaison reports. Sarah.
No report.
Erin.
So CPAC held a meeting on November 15th. It was the Basic Rights Workshop for parents. Sarah spoke about their next meeting on December 20th. PAIR held a meeting on November 16th. We, as sort of a topic of the night, talked about allyship in the community. And then we broke into the 3 committees of education and outreach and communication, because we're sort of trying to sort out, when PAIR does events or, has communication to get out, like what's, who should be our partners in the community, what's the content that we're trying to get out, and, how are we communicating that within the community. The first big event I think that's coming up is going to be Martin Luther King Day event. And also the second Reading Rhythm newsletter came out today. So if people are not signed up to receive that, it's great and you should sign up. And PAIR is not having a December meeting.
Great. Thank you. Tom.
I'll leave one of the town meeting thing to one of you guys. I guess the only other thing from my perspective is we have finalized the amounts for each individual employee from an ARPA perspective. They should be receiving a letter from Marianne, Sean, and I explaining that process and receiving the ARPA money in their paychecks on the 9th of December. So a small little Christmas bonus going in there for many of them. So we got that taken care of.
So breaking news on that, while you, Marianne, and I may have crafted the letter, per the advice of town council, it's going to be signed by the ARPA committee and the select board. So, just so you know.
Sounds good to me.
Yep. Breaking news.
As they get it.
Carla.
There was a permanent building committee meeting. It was really focused on the senior center, which we've all heard a lot about. We had a breakfast this morning with, Sean and I went, Dr. Milczewski went. We have the chair and vice chair of the select board, the school committee, and FinCom, and town manager. So, very exciting. And I'll let you talk about that.
I mean, if anybody doesn't know now, they're living under a rock. Obviously, the Killam feasibility study funding past town meeting, unanimously. I still grin every time I think about that, and with no questions or challenges.
No dissent at all.
No dissent at all. Yeah, it was a fantastic, just a great outcome. So thank you to Dr. Milczewski and Ms. Levesque and the whole team for pulling together just a, really fantastic presentation, doing all that prep work to get town meeting members into the facility. It made a huge difference and made the need very apparent to anybody who was questioning it before. So huge success there. The other, just quick report that I have is the select board has had, I think, one regular meeting since our last meeting. They had a couple of sort of, I'll say, relevant athletics-related discussions. So they accepted a gift that will build a new baseball field at Josh Eaton, which is exciting. There also was a lot of discussion around pickleball, which, has been the buzz around town apparently. And then they're also moving forward on the Simon's Way Exploratory Committee, which may have, sort of rec and student-related implications. And then the last thing is, I'll just say it just for public consumption. Obviously, everybody in the committee knows, we had a brief meeting before one of the nights of town meeting here in the library to discuss supporting a Safe Routes to School grant that the town is submitting, which would do road and safety improvements here in the Birch Meadow area. So fingers crossed that the state will opt to fund that grant and we'll be able to make some of those improvements. So. Okay, so that's it from a liaison perspective, and let's move to old business. We'll start with reviewing and approving the updated calendar. So the context for this, I think everyone knows, is there was a change in moving the high school graduation date from Sunday to Friday. We, I think, maybe put the brakes on it a little bit when it first came before this committee and just asked to make sure that we had sort of fully informed families, and families had an opportunity to weigh in. Dr. Milczewski, I know you had some feedback, positive feedback, I would say, in terms of that response.
So just a little bit more context, I think these are conversations I know that have been sort of more informal over the past, I guess since last spring in the high school community. More formally, Principal Tracy sent out an email to all RMHS senior families expressing that the date would be moved. This was early November. A few families reached out with just, feedback, with some with the pros, cons, things like that. I think generally the feedback leaned towards the positive. I think generally because I think this is something that a lot of families and students and staff have asked for a while. I think there's a couple of things that made this unique. Then having the ceremony under the lights outside, I think, was exciting for families. I think also having it on a Friday night, we think is more accessible to staff, and we're hoping to have more staff participation. If there's a rain date, we then have to move out inside, obviously. So Principal Tracy sent out early November. Assistant Principal Buckley also sent out a follow-up email just 2 weeks later on November 15th, saying if there were any specific family conflicts that would prohibit families from being able to attend, to please let her know so she could work with the families to try to resolve those issues. We want to make sure that we provide that extra step, especially given that this was kind of a later adjustment than maybe something we would want moving forward. Fortunately, the high school does not have any ongoing or lingering issues that have not been resolved around access for families. So at this point, we feel that we have, that there's everyone, from the class, of 2023, and families will be able to attend. Moving forward, this is something that we'd want to get on the calendar the first time, but obviously appreciate the community's understanding and flexibility as we move to a shift that we think will be positive for our community. So tonight you'll see the new calendar in the packet, which we're asking for the adjustment to move the graduation day up then to Friday, June 2nd, which would start at 6 p.m.
Great. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the SY 22-23 district calendar, which changes the date of graduation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Tom, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Carries 5-0. Thank you.
Keep working hard, seniors. Still got a ways to go.
I think many of the seniors like this change, having it under the lights and being able to have more family there.
It was, when we had it outside for COVID purposes, it was nice. You couldn't have a lot of family there. You could have 2 people sitting next to you, but it was nice. The outside part was nice.
But it was a parent when that was happening,
Oh, yeah, right.
Couple parents there.
The outside part was nice anyway. Not anything else around that situation. Okay, so we will now move on to second readings of a couple policies. Carla, do you want to start with the reading of JFABE, Educational Opportunities for Military Children?
Educational opportunities for military children to facilitate the placement, enrollment, and graduation.
I move to waive the reading. I'll get you off the hook. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Aaron. All in favor? Sarah, all in favor?
Explaining to Jada why we're laughing.
We're gonna waive the reading. Okay, so, Tom, I don't know if you want to say anything about this one. This is minor updates from last time.
Yeah, I mean, the only updates were the ones that we made in the meeting last time. Otherwise, it's the same content that we had previously.
Very good. Okay. Now is there a motion?
I move to adopt policy JFABE.
And is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Carries 5-0. Okay, we'll move on to second reading of policy JFABF, educational opportunities for children in foster care.
Educational opportunities for children in
Move
foster
to
care.
waive the reading of JFABF.
Thank you.
Motion by Aaron, is there a second? Seconded by Sarah, all in favor? All opposed, carries 5-0. Okay, Tom, I think it's the same.
Same exact
discussion.
update.
Okay.
Repeat.
So Carla, is there a motion on this one?
I move to adopt policy JFABF.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? That carries 5-0. Okay, moving on to new business and school improvement plans. So I think we have a presentation. We have a presentation for this one? And I don't know, Dr. Milichewski or
Yeah.
who we're starting with?
Yep, so I think we were all going to go to the podium. I think it's easier than trying to have everyone come up here, unless you think we're just seating.
There's nobody
the-
online,
nobody
so
on
that's
Zoom, so
fine.
that's fine.
Yeah, if there was somebody on Zoom, I would say something else, but nobody's on Zoom, so.
Okay. All right. Is the remote around somewhere?
AJ might have it.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Excited to walk through school improvement plans with the team here with us. I'd also like to acknowledge that right away we are missing two members of our elementary and middle school team. Dr. Burnham, unfortunately, is out sick, and Sarah Levesque is at the Title I conference, too, so she's away as well. So they're here with us in spirit, but have been contributing throughout the process. So I'm going to turn it over to the team to walk through the presentation. I want to share just two things I'm really excited about just off the bat before we to frame things. First is around just the consistency in some of just what you're going to see tonight, and then also is in some of the instructional focus of what's up here as well. So let me start with just the consistency. I think we spoke about this, from the time when I was interviewing with the committee too, is that there's certain things we believe as a district that are really important to have consistent across the district. Tonight you'll see some of those around curriculum, around assessment, and some things that we feel we need to have across all of our schools that hold true, that parents, when they send their children to school in the Reading Public Schools, there's certain things that they can expect are consistent and foundational across all of our schools. The second layer of that, there's also things that should be unique, that make schools special, where schools have a little bit more autonomy over things to do what they need to do to meet their school. So I think hopefully you hear a little bit about just here's what our commonalities across our district and why it's important to have those things in common. And then also second, what are some of those things that make each of these schools unique and special and things they're working on that are aligned to their own specific context. And then the second one, is instructional focus. A huge thank you to principals. I think everyone knows the job of a principal is incredibly challenging. And even if a principal is just to focus on the pure operational side of the work, that is a really, really challenging job, let alone asking principals to take on sort of being the instructional leaders of their building. And in a lot of these cases, lead instructional change around new curriculum, new assessment tools. That is a huge lift on our principals and a huge lift on our staff. And I think it's something that they've really stepped up to the plate and done well. I think it's encouraging in a time where there's a lot going on in schools, and it's hard to think about improvement and doing things when we know it's been a time of burnout, a time of difficulty, that our schools are really moving forward some really exciting instructional initiatives. And you're going to see that tonight, that there is a focus on instruction, and kudos to the entire team up here who are leading that work day in and day out on schools every day. So in our presentation tonight, Dr. Hardy is going to speak a little bit up front about just about SIPs in general, why SIPs, school council involvement, things like that. And then we're going to turn over to the principals who are going to talk through, again, the commonalities and then some of those things that are unique to their schools.
Thank you. All right. So for those of you who might be wondering, what is the SIP that you keep talking about? School improvement plans are a way that each school building sort of outlines what their goals, strategic objectives are for improvement. We believe that our work as educators is continual improvement, and so that we've never arrived. We are constantly looking at what's working, what's not working, and putting together plans that are measurable and actionable in order to improve outcomes for our students. And it's a way to sort of make that visible for the community so that they can see what the school is focusing on. It also, I think, is really helpful to the building leader to have this umbrella that unites the work that's happening. And then, of course, we present every year to the school committee, not only for you to approve, but also so that we're transparent with the community. So a little bit about how the SIPs are developed, and I'll speak a little bit specifically about this year and then just preview a little of our thinking going forward after this year. So we worked this year over the summer to finalize a district strategic plan. Many of you here were involved in that, as were our school leaders, and we're able to sort of launch that as we started the year. And then at that point, we were able to have building leaders start to work on how those strategic objectives looked in their particular buildings and to start to map that out. Along the way, they would meet with their school councils and kind of run these things by them, have the school council weigh in. And then the SIPs at some point came up to central office for us to review, and then are here in front of you tonight. We feel like the current process we took this year can be improved upon next year. We actually are already starting work now to talk about our strategic plan going forward, and hoping to put together a 3-year plan to share with you and with the community, and that work would be wrapped up well before the end of this current school year, so that our building leaders have the opportunity to put those plans together in a bit more of a timely fashion, so that we're not presenting the current school year plans due in December, when we're a third of the way through the school year. So that's really our intention. The other reason we would do that as well is because we really do think that the school site council, they're valuable partners in this work, and that the reason those councils exist is so that we can leverage the input of families and parents. They bring a different perspective. They bring in information that perhaps school staff, building leadership don't have, and that's why they're supposed to be our partners in that work. And when our process is a little rushed, as it was this year, we don't always have the time to develop that plan collaboratively. And so we think that that's an area we could improve in. So we look forward to kind of adapting our process going forward. So here, I just put in here just for your information for folks that aren't familiar with the school council. It is, according to Mass General laws, and it is a group that is made up of the principal, parents, teachers, and ideally community members as well. And really they're there as an advisory to the principal to help give perspective and share information. And one of their roles is to help in the development of the school improvement plan. One of the things I do want to highlight, and Dr. Milichewski alluded to this as well, is that our building principals were kind of starting with the framework of our district strategic plan. We think that this is important to bring coherence to the work. And as you'll hear as they talk tonight about their plans, we're excited about the coherence that these plans will create. And also, as we think about district work around professional development, curriculum review cycles, it's really essential that all of our schools are looking at their improvement efforts through those lenses. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the principals to talk through some of the commonalities that you might notice if you read through the elementary and middle school SIPs.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Caitlin Shelburne, principal of Joshua Eaton. So we've spent a lot of time as a district leadership and staff looking at what is sense of belonging, what does it mean to us in our schools, what will students feel when they come to us, and we came along the word affirmed. We want our students to feel affirmed and valued members of our community. We know that measuring sense of belonging is a really challenging task to do. It's very subjective. It's that qualitative type of data that we've spent some time as professionals collaborating and also working with other districts in the state to talk through how we measure sense of belonging. So this year we've implemented a district-wide survey that kind of teases out a couple of different questions that gives us information as to how our students are feeling at school. And a number of our schools have also done the work to kind of make some individual, more in-depth surveys that, you are even one-on-one with teacher and student to really ask questions and see how they're feeling at our school. We also know that things like classroom data and school-wide data speak to this as well. Things of attendance, referrals, what's the environment when we walk into the classroom. So these data points have helped us with things like our Tier 1 lessons. We've implemented, whether it's social emotional circles and things of that nature to individual mentoring, student groupings. So it's been pretty interesting to see that data and really look at it district-wide and let it kind of inform sort of our next steps. The second area is our new METCO school adjustment counselor roles. This has been such a pivotal new addition to our schools. We have one at each elementary school and one in our middle schools. And the vision for this role is really thinking about how can we live out the METCO vision within our schools. So these people have supported our Boston resident students and coordinating different aspects of that, walking to our classrooms and teaching lessons around social emotional learning and what does it mean to have that sense of belonging. At our schools, we see them outside at recess playing basketball with the kids and really just have really come in a very integral part. I know that my METCO school adjustment counselor is very popular. All of the kids and students want to spend some time in there. So it's been really just an incredible opportunity for our school. It's also exciting that all of the staff members in this role identify as people of color. And we know that access to an educator of color in a student's educational trajectory is a game changer, and data proves that. So it's been just an incredible rollout and very exciting to see at the elementary level. And I'll pass it to Rochelle to talk a little bit about in the middle school.
At the middle school level, I echo a lot of the sentiments that have already been expressed from Caitlin. We are so happy to have our METCO coordinator on board. He is really instrumental in really navigating at the ground level for our Boston resident students, but he's really a person who's there for everyone. Again, same as the elementary school levels, all of the students love seeing him in the cafeteria, stopping by his office. He's really helping our Boston families and Reading families connect through both differences in their similarities, and he's really helping to continue to foster that sense of belonging for our Boston resident students and continue to just bridge that real educational background that our Boston resident families are desiring. So we're so grateful to have him. We wish he were there every day.
So I think as you hear too, just like the piece of work and safe and supporting line members is trying to utilize the data as we measure sense of belonging and also then to better define these roles. It's like a work in progress as you see here too. So turn it over to Coherent Instructional Systems.
So as all of our schools are working to shift our leadership teams from a purely operational system to a more instructional focus with an effort to build teacher leaderships and strengthen school-wide teaching and learning for all students and get a cross-role voice in how that happens. All of our schools in the district are building instructional leadership teams, and the focus of those teams and the goal of those teams is to develop and communicate a clear vision of high-quality teaching and engaged student learning, promoting alignment to our standards and practices, and to develop and monitor our goals, as well as to establish a coherent culture of collaboration in the schools. To support all of this, building-based and district leaders are partnered with Salem State. There's 2 consultants who provide resources and professional learning for leaders around ILT implementation. We meet monthly with those consultants, and they help us effectively implement our ILTs in our schools, and they are also willing to meet individually with principals for how individual ILTs can be supported. So really, it's a really exciting initiative to look at coherent instructional systems and get all of our schools aligned on how we do that. Turn it over.
Excellent. So we know our teachers in Reading are incredible. There's so many awesome practices when you walk into classrooms. I know that's one of the things that we love most about our job is just being able to spend time watching the excellence kind of unfold in our educators' rooms. So we're really excited to roll out learning walkthroughs. It's going to probably look different in each building depending on the need and the personalities of, kind of the desires of staff, but really looking forward to building a culture where it's open door and staff walk into each other's rooms and say, I'm really wanting to learn more about, how our students, really carrying the heavy lift of the learning. What are you doing in your classroom? Or I have this really awesome sense of belonging practice. I'd love for people to come and see it. So really giving our teachers sort of that spotlight to learn from each other. At JE, we're excited to implement sort of vertical walkthroughs. Our teachers are really interested in learning about how instruction kind of builds off of each other each year to make sure that we're building that aligned, coherent system. So we'll have teachers, from different grade levels popping into each other to really look at instruction through that lens. But that's just one example. We look forward to, in our leadership team, really sharing what that's looking like across schools and learning from each other in that sense to really make this a solid practice in our schools.
I just want to add to that too. One of the, I think, important parts of the walkthrough process is. I think one of the other important parts of the walkthrough process is that building leaders are also partnering with district curriculum coordinators, and they're also doing walkthroughs with us so that we can really calibrate on what instruction looks like across the different subject areas. Central office leaders have also come in to do some of those walkthroughs too. So to really look across the schools at what high quality instruction looks like, so that we can have those deep conversations about how to improve that.
Sounds good.
And while we're on this topic, before we switch, if you don't mind, ladies, first of all, I love this topic. Very much appreciate the work and effort that's going there. I was talking to Dr. Milicheska the other day about what are we doing across schools? So the work happening in schools, maybe we're building that up this year. Is there a thought process that will expand that across schools? And especially, I'm looking at my two middle school principals, right? And the work that Coolidge and Parker, we've talked in the past about some of the challenges between the two, from a difference of execution over the 3-year period for students. So what are we doing to share the best practices from school A to school B and get the teachers as observing from opposite schools as necessary?
Yep, so in our last meeting with Salem State, this topic came up exactly because we were talking about the walkthroughs and all that was happening in our building, and we started having conversations with different principals at different levels even at the table, and we were getting really excited about, okay, we're talking so much about what this looks like in our buildings, but this can really go to another level, to your point, Tom. So we have our teachers meeting every month at early release across buildings, sharing practices. That's kind of where we're at right now with that. I could see the next step being between the two schools, going and seeing each other's classrooms. I feel like that's very easy to put into place and to support. And we also had conversations about actually having our 6th grade teachers go visit 5th grade and our 8th grade teachers go visit 9th grade and vice versa. 5th come to the middle schools, 9th come to the middle schools, because we realize there's so much to learn. To Caitlin's point, there's so many wonderful things going on, but when you become too familiar with your own zone, you don't get to see all those great things. So we're excited for those next steps right along with you and in the early stages of planning, so.
Great to hear, thank you.
One more thing that we've kind of started to do, even with the math program so far, is that we have been bringing classroom teachers at the elementary school level together at different schools visiting and watching, someone from the program to come in and teach, and then the teachers come together across the schools to discuss what they're doing. And so they're having that in-person time as well, which is also a launch for what we're wanting to do. So it's really nice. So we are there, and then we're getting into all the buildings as well and starting to share that. But there's a level of safety and comfort to build that, to invite someone into the classroom. So I think that creating these conversations is the first step to get into the classrooms across schools. So I'm going to jump, Alyssa Gallegos is a principal at Barrows, and I'm going to jump into assessment and data analysis. As we bring in the new curriculums of our core and the illustrative math over the last 2 years, that comes with a lot of new assessments. So we're in the phase right now that we're really learning how to do those well, and then how to take that data and inform our instruction as we move forward. So we're in an early start of this, but the way that we're making that really successful is that we're really leaning into each other. We're providing time for the teachers. We've built in some more time at the elementary school level that they're rotating an hour through. I think at most schools, we're doing like a chorus block, which is really neat for the students to experience chorus at an elementary school level, as they have that just a little taste before they get to middle school, while the teachers can come together to really look at our data and talk about it and kind of, synthesize all of that and say, what do we need to do with this? What are we seeing our students know? Where do we need to move from there? So we have multiple opportunities, and we have a great calendar that Heather Leonard and Erin Burchell have planned out for us. So for math, we have AMC math, we have common math assessments, and of course, there's the daily conversation. The math has moved more to having a lot more conversation, and the students are doing more talking. So we're helping the teachers learn how to listen for what the students know and what they can tell us about their learning. Same in our core program now we have, it's called Independent Reading Level Assessment. Students will start talking about the IRLA. We've already kind of got to the acronyms stage of it now. But that's a lot more conversational, where the teachers are encouraged to do this multiple times a week, so they really know where their students are, and they're helping them move along so that they're matching the right text and really understanding their full understanding of literacy in general. So we're really in that beginning stage, as I said, of learning how to use it. What do we know about our students, and how can we move our instruction to do that? So those are kind of the big things. I don't know if I'm missing anything else, but that's where we are for assessment and data.
Question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
About how many days so far have the teacher, third, fourth, and fifth graders participated in training for Art Core?
Oh, a lot. It feels like a real lot. We have had coaches come into our building probably 2 or 3 times, where they're working 2 times. Individually, they've also been in more professional development training with them, and we started right before school started, so they really had to jump right in. Have we used some, has it been 2 times? 2 times where they are, being given information. Math, it's been a little bit different. They've had different times have we done Fridays? I'm trying to think, some Fridays, as well as what I talked about, where they were coming to different schools and watching other people teach the lessons, building the lessons, evaluating how they went, and then doing them again in a different classroom. What else did I want to, there was something else that I was thinking about that. And then also, as principals, we're also getting training to look at the data, because the really awesome piece that I think sets our core apart from some other programs is that we're able to look globally at a really big lens of where all of our students are. So as far as, and this is another point that we can use this data with our reading specialist, with our tutors, that we can really see who needs it most, not, well, you get 2 kids from this classroom, 2 from there, but which students really need the most targeted instruction, and we're able to look at it from that level, from a school-based lens as well. So we're getting
how the teachers feeling overall? Are they overwhelmed? Are they okay with it? Are they excited about it?
All of that, I would say. Yes, yeah. I think they knew we need to do something different, right? We need something much better than what we had, but it's a big learning curve.
Sure.
And so I think with math, we were able to pilot it a little bit differently, and so it felt a little bit different with this reading program, but I think teachers are certainly excited. They're working extremely hard. They're dedicated. And the best thing I think about writing teachers is that they know what our students need to know. They know the standards. And so when you have that long-term goal, they're making sure that even if something feels a little, off for them, they're able to kind of make it work, so that at the end of the school year, the students will have what they need. The teachers just working extremely hard to get there.
Thank you.
Excellent. So it is, I'm bringing myself back to last year, where we were in front of the select board and advocating for the Art Core curriculum, and now we're in December, our first kind of term of implementation. So just to speak to what Alyssa shared, our grade 3 through 5 teachers are working so hard. It's so incredible to watch and be a part of the planning conversations that happen around this curriculum. There's a lot to learn. There's a huge learning curve, but my literacy specialist, my reading specialist said a couple of weeks ago in a meeting with our tutor that this is like the most comprehensive program that she's been here for 20 years that she's seen. So it's exciting that it has that tier one component of really a knowledge building. When we think about the shifts in the Common Core, building knowledge through nonfiction text is a major component. And right now, we're in Unit 2, and our students are grappling with science concepts, looking at ecosystems and animal adaptations. And it's really awesome to see our students, just really diving right in and engaging with that work, and really connecting our reading with our writing. It's our literacy block. So that's best practice, and it's connected to the vision of the Common Core. So it's really exciting to see where we're at right now. And we know that we're also in year 1 of K-2, illustrative math implementation, which is also grounded in those key shifts in the Common Core. So I use this curriculum in California. And it's just the most incredible, when we think about the aspects of rigor that are targeted from procedural to really kind of being able to look at a problem and say, this is how I've solved it, or understanding the conceptual math. So if you walk into our K-2 classrooms, you're going to see students working in various different games, and the teacher is saying, can you show me another way to solve this? And maybe can I now hear the most efficient way? So our students are really getting messy with the learning and the numbers, and it's exciting to see that kind of play out. So I know we'll go a little bit more in depth around the professional development next, but it feels like we're in a really great place curriculum-wise, the materials that we have. Now it's just learning and growing and building from here.
I'm actually going to summarize some of what was already said around the professional development because it kind of came up in some of the questions. But I think the district has been incredibly intentional with the type of professional development they provided for staff around this. So while it is, like Caitlin just said, a real shift from the way that we were teaching to what we're doing now, each school for the ARC-Core implementation has been assigned a one-to-one coach. So every school has their own coach that comes. For the most part, it's about every month. Sometimes it's 6 weeks. They've come 2 times already. They're coming again in December to each school. And they're working with building principals and building-based staff to provide information around the new materials, around the assessment tools, around the technology tools related to the assessment tools, as well as really just supporting and fielding a lot of teacher questions around individual lessons or unit questions. The coaches also meet with teachers in classrooms and model lessons for them, which has been really helpful. They've modeled how to use the assessment system, how to use the IRLA, which is the acronym for the reading assessment that we're using. And they really tailor each school visit to what the schools need. So they reach out to each of the building principals. They reach out to Erin Burchell, our curriculum coordinator, to see what kind of feedback are you getting from teachers, what kind of support do they need. So it's really tailored to teachers' needs so that we're providing efficient professional development that teachers are going to find useful. Building leaders also have their own type of professional development and professional learning. So we do leader learning sessions. Those also are about once a month, where we all get together and we talk about not only the assessment tools and sort of what our building-based assessments look like, but we look at district assessments, and to talk a little bit about sort of calibrating on getting into other schools, as each of those sessions is set in a different school. So all the leaders go to that school, and we then do walkthroughs in that school around the ARC-Core implementation. So we've been now to 2 schools, and we'll be to another school just coming up in a couple weeks. So we get a chance to see the instruction in other schools with this new curriculum. Similarly, the illustrative math is also, I know Heather's going to talk a little more about math in a little while, but the district, again, has been very intentional. So our K-2 teachers have, September and October, they went to full day and half day professional development days where they met at an individual school and sort of hashed through some of the curriculum. Our 3 through 5 teachers are utilizing a math learning lab, which I know Heather's going to talk about, and Alyssa described a little bit before, where teachers get to see a trainer teach a lesson. They get to come back together, talk about it, and then look at how what it is that they learned can be applied to their own planning of their own lessons. So. On top of that, we also have a lot of our, as many as we can of our Friday early release days are also set aside for some of this district-wide calibration across these two implementations, so. It's been really great to see our teachers really helping each other too around this. So I see a lot of our K-2 teachers going to our 3 through 5 teachers who have already implemented the illustrative math and say, hey, what does this look like for you? How can I do this better? How can I, what does this mean? And I see that being something that we can transfer for the rollout of the ARC core for our K-2 teachers next year as well, and be really intentional with how we partner up our teachers so that they have an sort of embedded support as well as the ARC core coaches that will continue working with us.
Nicole, I'm not going to let you off the hook that easily. In fact, all the elementary principals can come forward. On the PD side of it, in particular on the ARC core side, I think it's pretty clear, at least seems pretty clear to me, that you and the teachers are drinking from the fire hose when it comes to ARC and the implementation. How much of that is ARC and how much of that is the science behind ARC, if you can delineate between the two?
Yeah, you want to speak?
I think that's a great question. I think we are grappling with so much change from how we've done our Tier 2 model. Now it's our reading tutors do a lot of push in the classroom using the toolkits, and our teachers are moving from more of an isolated skills approach to an integration of, knowledge building, like I had shared. I think there are a number of high-level shifts that now looking forward to the K-2 rollout, I'm excited, now that I've seen it and I know it, to really kind of name those at the beginning. That's some of the work of our ILTs, is to really kind of step back and say, what is the best practices that we're seeing in ARC? What are the changes that we've experienced that we can kind of be really intentional about? I think the program itself also has a lot of really great resources. There's so much to learn from, how to teach the reading and the writing component connected to the kind of the details of how do you actually administer an IRLA, which really is a very comprehensive and step-by-step assessment. It's very different from our F&P assessment. So that piece, I think, has been one of the biggest learning curves in the implementation, because we are moving away from just we're assessing 3 times a year to we're being really kind of strategic about always having the IRLA be like our best friend. It's supposed to be on our desk and, kind of keeping it up with where our kids are. So I think it's a little bit of both. But I think in the framing and stepping back, that's the work of the ILT in each school and with us as a district to say, like, what really are the shifts that we're experiencing? Because like Heather shared, like Sarah shared, it's a complete 180 and we're totally in the right direction. It's just going to take us time to kind of really build up our practices.
Sure. So building on that, Caitlin, thank you for the answer. Part of the reason why I'm asking the question is there's pretty public media about understanding the why, right? Why am I doing X, Y, and Z? Because somebody tells me to do it, or because that's what the science says is the best thing to do? Do we perceive we're understanding the why and being taught the why now, or do we perceive we're being told to do X, Y, and Z?
One of the things that I wish Erin was here tonight too, because she is like so deeply embedded in this work. One of the things that we're learning with ARC core and kind of their plan as to how you roll this out is exactly that type of understanding has to be embedded in the work. The first part of the school year, like what we've led up to right now, is the point where teachers have to learn the most in regards to structures and setup. And so really what we focused on so far, while starting to embed some of that work, is really like, how do we get this up and running? And now some of the upcoming PD is a little more, okay, now that we've got it up and running, now that you're going to kind of repeat that structure, let's dig into a little bit more of why these systems work. The other piece of this too, that's going to be coming now that we've done this sort of setup stage, is we keep talking about the IRLA, and it really is the heart and soul of this program, because what it does is it outlines the skills and strategies that our students need to read. And so really for our teachers to start to understand the why behind it, they really had to know that ERLA inside and out and understand at their grade level, what are those grade level standards that all of our students need to be mastering, and so all of them need to be taught. But also for our students that aren't there, what are the skills that they are lacking? And so really understanding then, what is that shift in instruction? What is the direct instruction that needs to happen? Yes, we want our students to be reading more and reading a lot, but they also need explicit instruction in the areas that kind of will take them to that next step. And so that work is embedded and ongoing. And I think as Caitlin alluded to, I know I had a conversation with Erin about this too, that she was meeting with our core coordinator, sort of saying like, I think our next step, we really have to step into what are those big shifts and why? And they agreed. They said, yep, that is part of our plan. We've done this a lot. We completely agree. But part of getting teachers to understand that too is sort of having those basic structures in place. So I do think also grades 3, 4, and 5, you look one way, K-2 next year will look slightly different, just because the foundational work does look a little different starting in kindergarten. Obviously, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we're still building those foundational skills without a doubt. But it really starts K1 and 2.
Just to finally, not a question, just an observation. Chuck and I had a chance to go with Erin to Birch Meadow a couple weeks ago, and we had a chance to kind of dive into some of the ERLA and the results and the ability to see, when a student was last assessed, on where are they now, how have they grown, and the breakdown of the ERLA. It's much, much more granular and much more directed in terms of what I should do to help a student, like you're saying, Sarah. But the evidence is there already in some of the growth for some of those students as a result of that breakdown. And that was 3 weeks ago. I can imagine now it's even further forward. And it's encouraging to see that the assessment is leading to the instruction, and the instruction is leading to growth.
Exactly.
And, just want to echo that and say thank you for all of you engaging in the work. And the reason why I asked the question is I think it's really important that we're not following any particular publisher, but we're following what the best practice is. And if the publisher is implementing the best practice, great. If the publisher is not implementing the best practice, we need to know that so we can know how to challenge them, make them better, and or do what we need to do otherwise. So thank you again for engaging in the work that's already happening there.
I think it's a great point, and I'll just say, you hear us talk about the ERLA a lot. Obviously, it's part of the ARC Core program, but the ERLA is actually based on the Common Core. So those skills are not something that ARC Core has made up. They're really based on the evidence of how our students learn to read and what the progression of those skills are. So ARC Core has created their system for how we gather that information and, the very many assessments that we give our students to figure out where they are in their skill development. But they haven't made these skills up. This is, as you point to, these come from other sources, and can be found in other places.
With kindergarten, are you seeing significant differences between those enrolled in half-day and full-day?
In regards to our into literacy or across the board or?
Across the board.
Yeah, unfortunately we do. The more time that we have our students in school, the more access they have to learning, to social interactions with their peers, and just school readiness. We have a relatively small group of kids, just one class this year in half-day kindergarten, but it's been an ongoing conversation as to how we bolster and add supports for those students so that when they move into first grade, there isn't as much of a gap. But thanks for asking that, Jada.
Like my kid that doesn't like me to sit, it only works when I stand up. On to middle school commonalities.
So one of the things that we have started this year is the Literacy Leadership Team, and that is work with Coolidge and Parker humanities teachers, plus Erin Burchell and Sarah Hardy as well. And our goal really is to strengthen and improve student achievement and growth in English language arts. So part of that is for our group together to undertake a curriculum material review process based on the Mass DESE high-quality curriculum evaluation and selection process. So we're going to be starting with an inventory of our middle school ELA curriculum. It's a really great process because it's one of the ways that the two schools are working together with the educators there, looking at what we are currently doing with our ELA practice, being able to collaborate and talk with one another to really get a better sense of what's happening, and then go forward and select a curricular material to use going forward.
We've touched on math already a little bit tonight, but in the math department, we now are grateful to have resources in 6th grade and 7th and 8th grade, the illustrative math in 6th grade and Envisions in 7th and 8th grade, which are very strong standards-based resources that have rigorous problem solving embedded within them. And so this year, we are really focusing, as I know you've heard Sarah Hardy say in the past, how all students deserve to have high-quality resources and high-quality instruction across all of their classes. And I've been really appreciative that our central office team is really supporting that across many different subjects, and right now, math has those things in place. So the question right now is, how are we using those tools and aligning our practices and aligning to those standards in a strong way, while keeping teacher autonomy and creativity and those things that make our teachers kind of passionate in the classroom and sharing their joy of learning with kids. So that our kids who go through our middle schools have a shared experience in math that's foundationally the same, no matter which classroom you visit or go into, that they're getting that same core foundation. So our teachers are really spending time in their professional development time, digging into these resources, aligning their scope and sequence, and really testing the waters of like these rigorous questions that really engage the students in problem solving and in really leaning into the learning rather than just getting the answer right. And you've heard about the learning labs, and that's part of the professional development that's happening in the math space, where we have the PD coming to our buildings and leading our teachers through a full day math training where they're practicing a lesson, changing the lesson together, redoing the lesson, and really having great conversations about instruction. So we're kind of dual working the instructional piece along with the foundational resource piece.
We also have been fortunate, and we're at the very early stages of really analyzing and digging into our schedules. So we've been working with a consultant to look at the Parker schedule, the Coolidge schedule. We really want to ensure that our schedules enable high-quality practice and enable rigorous instructional practices as well. So we have teams of teachers from both schools. We're studying our schedules, looking at other schedules that are out there, and coming together to see what works at Coolidge, what works at Parker, what are things that we need to change in our own schedules going forward. So it's the beginning stages of a process where we're really fortunate to be able to work together and start thinking about how can we make sure that any improvements that we do to our schedules really capture the sense of belonging for students, help make progress on MCAS indicators, and continue to foster coherent instructional systems.
And we could have put a lot of things on here, which you can see in our school improvement plan, but we did want to highlight the new tool that we have access to this year, because last year, while we were talking about our students and the progress that we're making and how do we know about their progress, the only real indicator we had to go on was MCAS. And we know MCAS is just one of many indicators about how students are doing. So the district invested in the iReady benchmarking tool for the middle schools, and we've done one round of implementation of that. And hearing all of this information about the ARC data and how useful that is to kids, this is almost like a parallel version that both for ELA and for math, that our students now have taken one round, and we've used that as an indicator to say, how are we doing on our Massachusetts standards across our grade levels? And how is that helping to inform instruction and intervention right now at a fairly big scale? So for example, in ELA, we see through this data that the number one issue we could work on across all grade levels is vocabulary. So right away, it's not just our English teachers starting to work on that, it's our science teachers, it's our social studies teachers, it's our math teachers. So it's kind of exciting that everyone just sees the data and we're seeing this internal excitement from teachers to start working on that data, because everyone is always wanting to do best by kids and improve. So that's been great to have more data early in the year to help inform instruction and intervention. And we have our interventionists also pulling individual student data too, to make sure that they're targeting interventions more purposely than they would have without the data. So we're really excited for that as well.
And just to add one other thing, any of the content-specific groups, like our math groups and our ELA curriculum groups, we're including special educators as part of the process as well, to be looking at improving their practice and giving their voice as well as part of our studies and analysis.
Data, I'd love to go back to that for a second. As soon as you said that they're noticing the vocabulary is a gap, that was like, bing, of course, because we haven't been teaching vocabulary for a long time. I'm curious to see, especially if we think about this year over year and we start tracking data year over year, if that starts changing, especially in our 6th grade levels as ARC brings the vocabulary level up, and especially the academic vocabulary level up, that we start to see that. Can you speak at all to the specificity of the vocabulary to the subject? Is iReady measuring their math vocabulary versus maybe a core reading vocabulary, core academic, reading vocabulary? Or how is it differentiating that? Do you have any idea?
I don't know that it's that deep. I do know that when my teachers were doing a deeper dive into the vocabulary question, looking at the data, I popped into their group and they had honed in on a need for focusing on vocabulary that was more kind of analytical across subjects. So when you're, compare, contrast, like those kind of words that start to get into action items with thought that might be drawn across different subjects, that seemed to be an area that they felt the data showed. So I'm not sure, I didn't look at it myself in terms of that level, but they were able to problem solve to that degree, I would say, based on what they were looking at.
I would expect that sort of thing might come out of more rigorous writing instruction happening in the elementary grades as well, that you might see a change over a few years.
Yep.
So, okay, thank you.
So to close on our last 2 slides, I'm going to quickly speak about outcomes that are common across all of the SIPs that the community can expect, and also move into just the closing, which is, while we talked about a lot of commonalities, each of them sharing something that's unique to their own school. I'm going to go through this quick just because of time, and happy to answer questions after too. The wording may be different on all of their SIPs in terms of just the outcomes, but some things that are like the sentiment of what's common across them is first a commitment to looking at the MCAS benchmarks, which are about in terms of achievement and attendance. We're expecting that DESE will release those benchmarks within the next week or 2, we're expecting, and that will give us the actual quantifiable targets for us as a district and the school level that we'll hold ourselves accountable to. Second is progress towards meeting at least 85% of Access progress targets. That's just more specific commitment to progress towards for our multilingual learners through the Access test. Back to the MCAS, looking at decreasing achievement gaps you see between some demographic groups that we outlined there. We know that that's been a trend that we've outlined over the past couple of MCAS presentations. And then the last 3, this year, one of our commitments is just to having the schools just to be able to have the data organized in front of them through some sort of dashboard that they can then use to drive instruction, intervention supports. You'll see in italics what we're committed to moving forward is that next year we're hoping and expecting that schools can then have more specific targets to say, knowing that we understand the ERLA a little bit, here's what we can expect for in specific growth from our students. Now that we know how to use iReady, here's maybe a percentage of what we can expect to for per grade level in content areas. We're just not quite there yet. So what we're expecting and schools are expecting is now to have just a sort of a dashboard that outlines all this data in front of them. And then to follow up, just some evidence, the schools with their school councils, and obviously in conversations with me and with our district team, to be able to show some evidence of school level, classroom level, and student level interventions that responds to the trends that they've seen in the data that they just spoke about. And then last but not least, some sort of documented system for assessing student sense of belonging, including some of the indicators that they would be measuring, a schedule to assess, sense of belonging, and various interventions and supports that they could use. We've been cautioned by many who this is their field of work to not say you want to, expect consistent growth and particular sense of belonging metrics, that this is something that really ebbs and flows depending on a lot of factors that can be outside of your control. But really what's most important is that you have a system to measure this and you have actual interventions that you can use and track the effectiveness of the interventions. But to make this of sort of a summative measure of how you're doing in sense of belonging is kind of a dangerous bet in that way too. So those are all commonalities across all the schools.
Before you jump off this one to the individual ones, number 3 is my bugaboo, right? I mean, I love that we're trying to close the gap, but the language needs to be improved. By doing what? We can't just say we're going to close the gap because then we can bring the higher ones down and the gap closed. And that's not what you're trying to achieve, and I know that's not what you're trying to achieve, but language matters when it comes to goals like this. We should make sure we're by raising up those and continuing to encourage the raising of the top as well. We're not collapsing, we're raising everybody, and this is just raising a little faster.
Which Good point. You know I'm in alignment with that. I think that what we expect to see out of the DESE benchmarks is how it's been in the past, is when you start to get the benchmarks that they sort of set out for you, they do expect that the gap is closed, and the gap is not closed by lowering the bar from your students who are achieving. The bar also does raise for students, even your students who are achieving a higher level. So I think you will see that through the first bullet, but I also agree with the intentionality of the language as well. I appreciate you raising that. Okay, so. There we go. So I just also, again, like as they close with their individual, we've asked them each just 1 to 2 minutes. They could each speak with great pride about their schools all day, I'm sure, but we asked them just to kind of keep it short on what they are. I would also just like to thank them again, we could have had them read through their SIPs individually, but I think today probably you got a better sentiment of like what's happening in the schools, and just even listening to all of you, even tonight, and just hearing just all of the work that you're leading instructionally, and I think we see it on a daily basis how well they're doing it and how they're, how well staff is doing it is really, really exciting and encouraging. So just hearing that is a lot that's going on in the schools instruction, so it's kudos to the team. So. All right, so we'll close just by each of them sharing out just something, again, a specific area of focus, maybe that aligns to a need in their community, or just something they're excited about that sort of adds to the identity of their school community. So we can go in this order down. Lucky Alyssa.
Yeah, so, yeah, I know. I could go on and on about Barrows. There are so many things that were already going well and that we are adding to, especially now that we're really back to normal. But I kind of focused on two big ones, one for the academic rigor and for social emotional learning. So one thing that we've done so far, because this is talking about what we're in action for right now, is that the staff got together to use the School Reform Initiative, a data analysis protocol. And we did start with MCAS data, and we've kind of been carrying this out with different types of data. But we did it vertically, so we had mixed of the fifth grade teachers that give the MCAS with the kindergarten, with the school nurse, that we were all looking at it through this protocol. And what we found, we really looked at where those areas are that we need to grow for all students that will accelerate. It kind of goes to your point, Tom, how we're going to go quickly. And we knew that because we're doing the R-Core and the math, and we have all these things that we kind of have to go lockstep to make sure that we're doing it correctly with fidelity, we needed to find other areas to bring that in. So we've done a couple things that we're starting to do, that we are embedding science and social studies vocabulary in our library and technology. So our librarian is starting to make her lessons around those areas that might be hard to get to during class time. We have added art enrichment classes for K through 2, and we're taking those math standards that we feel like we sometimes might not get to in June, or our test, we teach, but then it's a whole year before they really see it again on the MCAS, for instance. So a big one is in geometry. So how can the art teacher use our math, language, and vocabulary while she's doing a really creative lesson? So it's not just an art lesson, but it's a math lesson that's really hands-on and creative. We're adding mini lessons in, especially geometry again, in our weekly morning announcements. So all students, K through 2, will see one, and then 3 through 5 will another. So we just keep kind of bombarding them with vocabulary and lessons that it just becomes something that they just know by the end of the year, and they don't really even, realize it's not a hard lesson that they're really having to work through. For our social emotional, we are really trying to create more of a trauma-sensitive learning environment for a school. We have the REACH program. We have students with social emotional disabilities. But we know that all students, any student, especially coming out of the pandemic, have been infected by trauma, and we don't need to know what it is, but we need to make sure that we're teaching all students through that lens. So we've already started creating or providing professional development for our staff about what that looks like and what it should look like in our classroom when we're giving our instruction, because we know that if our students aren't available to learn, it doesn't matter what kind of curriculum we're using or what we're doing every day. So we need to connect. So we're finding ways to build relationships, and that was a strong focus that I gleaned from our school council when I met, as well as the teachers are coming saying, like, we need more of this. We need to make sure that we're connecting well with our students, and we understand like their window of tolerance. When can they learn? When do we need to back off? And really kind of having a good understanding of how students learn. So there's just two of many good things that we're doing at Barrows.
Sure, and I'll highlight a couple for JE. So one of our big focuses is on attendance. Last year, we know we had many factors that impacted attendance. As a school, our attendance was 94% average, and our goal this year is 97%. So that's one of the work of our school adjustment counselor, my school nurse, our school psychologist, and then the classroom teachers, special educators. We are meeting as a team. We make daily phone calls and, meet proactively with families who are struggling for various reasons to have their students come to school consistently. So we've definitely seen some growth in our data and excited about some of those practices and making sure that all Jaguars are present every day by the first bell. We have a ring. Secondly is just sort of a fun one. We're working to build out our PBIS system. And so when we think about our positive behavior incentive system, school connectedness for our 3 through 5 students, we're rolling out our school store where our students can trade in their completed spot cards, which they get spotted for, showing our core values. And just for some fun, like little motivating, locker stickers and JE gear and things of that nature. So that's led by our student council, and they did a lot of work to ask our students what they would like to see at the store, and we're excited. A grade 3 starts tomorrow. So wanting to really kind of just make our students have, have our, I think I just lost my voice. I think it's
water over there.
I wanted, part of our staff has wanted to make sure that our students are very centered in our initiatives, and from my entry plan last year, some of these kind of themes came up of our student council wanted to take more ownership. We also have some student-led groups that are happening. We're starting with a really small pilot of students who are just passionate about something. So one is Harry Potter books, and the other is around just community service projects. So they meet for just 15 minutes in the morning once a week, and our, students teaching students, and it's been a cool way to just sort of build those leadership skills in our Jaguars.
Michelle Byrne. Can I just say, I know one of the students who started that with you, the one whose name starts with an M, and every time I'm in the car with her, she's one of my daughter's best friends.
Oh, really?
Every time I'm in the car with her, she just like raves about how much support, like how much you've embraced that. So like fostering that student leadership has been awesome. So thank you for that.
I will say that I got lesson plans all summer long. So they've planned out like a 6-week scope and sequence with like a do now, and they're really watching what their teachers are doing. So that's
So
awesome.
I should probably own up to the fact that we've also done some brainstorming on those car rides back from dance.
Okay.
So she gets about 30 minutes of strategy prep with me, every couple weeks. So,
That's awesome. That's great connection. Thank you for sharing.
I'm just going to highlight a couple things that we're doing at Wood End, among many of the other things that are happening. So kind of picking up on the student-led initiative. So we have a student council that's led by our school librarian, who does a fantastic job of getting kids to really take ownership for the work that they're doing. And on top of our school-wide assemblies that they run monthly, we've decided to embed with help from my instructional leadership team, some school-wide K through 5 projects and activities that are really focused on a sense of belonging and inclusivity, and using popular picture books and or videos to really bring the school together. And we create lessons with the instructional leadership team to roll out either over 2 weeks, and then we kind of do like a culminating project together. So like for Halloween, we all dressed up as giraffes, and we did some work around Giraffes Can't Dance, which is around the concept that everyone kind of beats to their own drum, and we all can do everything if we have our own music to do it. And really it was gleaned from a lot of the conversations I had with families and staff during my entry planning process about making sure that all of our students feel like they're included in our community. So this is an effort to bring everyone together to do that. Similarly, this year we're piloting a new branch of our student council, which just started on Monday, which is going really smoothly. So we're 4 days in, and that's a good sign. Our safety officers. So our student council, we take 18 students every year, and there's multiple students in our 5th grade who really want to be part of that. And we only take 18 because you can't have 42 kids in the student council, and this is just an off branch of it. And those officers are working to model our core values, and they work in our placard system, they work in our morning arrival, and they go into our K-2 classrooms, and they're sort of our model students, and they volunteer to do that. And the kids are really excited that I saw a fifth grade student this morning, like leaning on the door, like knocking to get into the kindergarten door this morning, like she was so eager to get in. And it was 8:01, so she was really eager to get in and to get going, and really looking at fostering that sense of belonging and creating the culture around everyone kind of belongs here, and how do we do that? So I'm really excited about the work that the ILT team is doing around that, and our student leaders who are really taking ownership of making sure that everyone in our school feels like they belong there, so.
I don't know if you do your own social media or who does your social media, but I so enjoy following it. And as someone who, doesn't have a child at Woodend, I feel like I get just a nice picture into the culture that you're building there. And it's really fun to follow some of what you've been doing.
Oh, so you have seen all of my Thursday dress ups?
All of them. I follow all of it. So
Yeah, no,
I appreciate having that glimpse into what's happening.
Yeah,
there.
our team works really hard to make sure that our families feel like they're connected to our building too, and social media is one way to sort of quietly connect with our families. So, yeah, I'm glad you had a chance to check it out. I send the pictures for some of those, but I do not own the Twitter account or the Instagram account, but we have staff who do, so.
Well, they're doing a good job.
So Rochelle and I decided we would focus on sense of belonging, just a couple examples, since you already heard from us on the coherent instructional system side. One thing that I would like to share is during the pandemic, we had students start a Unity, Equity, Diversity group. They self-named that, and it was a really strong group that really gave kids a purpose to meet during the pandemic. And it has evolved over the years, and I'm excited to say that this year, Mr. Kanzader, our METCO coordinator, is co-leading it. And because we have a bus that comes at 3:15 every day for our Boston resident students, they are now able to participate and have really almost taken over the ownership of that group, along with Reading residents. And it's been really special to see that we're providing a space where we're getting their feedback on our school, because it's all about like raising student voice and really helping them to feel like they can make a difference in the school, and they have my ear, and we can really work together to make our school as inclusive and reflective as possible. So that's been very exciting. And the second thing I would like to share is that we're bringing Challenge Day back again this year, as you know, because it went through here, but it'll be happening in January, right after the holiday. And we've obviously had to take a break through the pandemic with that as well. And we're excited to share the experience with, I know Parker has a new administration and a new central office, and we're just really excited to share the experience with our 8th graders at the Focus, because we really feel like they get a lot out of the Challenge Day experience, building empathy and understanding for each other, and learning not to judge, and learning to embrace each other for all of who we are. So happy to bring that back as well, and look forward to reporting back on that after that's done. So we could, again, list many other things, but 2 things I'm excited to share tonight.
So sticking with the same theme of sense of belonging and social emotional learning, I'm really excited that we are going to be bringing urban improv rehearsals for life to Parker Middle School this year. I'm very excited because it is something that not only all of our students are going to be able to experience, but our teachers are going to be able to experience, and the community is going to be able to experience it. So at Rehearsals for Life is an improv group. They come in, they do small presentations with a team at a time, and they go through different experiences on the stage. So for our 6th graders, they'll go through a skit on bullying, they'll pause at a certain point, and then they'll interact with the audience to be able to say, what do you do next? And students might be able to engage in that. At the end, they have a conversation about what are the learnings that we've had from that. I'm going to continue that learning through our advisory classes as well, so that after they go through these experiences, these are conversations that they'll be able to continue in their advisory. Our 6th graders will focus on bullying, our 7th graders will focus on cyberbullying, and our 8th graders will focus on microaggressions. And if it all goes as hopefully successful and we like it, I would love to have them back every year, so that by the time they graduate from Parker Middle School, they will have experienced that social emotional learning from all of those different aspects. Another thing that I've started this year is a student council with the students. It's a little bit different than a traditional student council. I want this to be an opportunity for me to really get a sense for what do our students want? How are they feeling? What do they think about the school? How can I get them involved in different parts of the school? So We've been meeting on different days after school. I try to vary the day because once our students become middle schoolers, they are very engaged, they are very involved, and I want it to be open to as many people as possible. So if I vary the day that we meet, then I can get as many voices as possible. So one of the first things we did was worked on what they would like to see for a Spirit Week, and we're currently thinking about MLK Day, what we can do for an assembly for that day, or incorporating some service projects as well to honor Martin Luther King Jr. So again, I could keep going on all the wonderful things that make Parker great, but thank you for giving me the time.
Good. So just as an overall observation, I love the way that this was both presented, but also the way that it was developed, like that degree of consistency and is helpful. But we still just saw that there's a lot of room for sort of individual, laboratories, if you will, at each school, and we can try to do different things and learn from, what works and what doesn't. So, whether it's student leadership or challenge days or dressing like giraffes or, whatever other examples there might be. I thought that was a great example, actually. But whatever other examples there might be, I really appreciated the way that these were not only constructed but presented tonight, so thank you. Erin, go ahead.
So no question, just commentary. Just piggybacking on what Sean was saying, like something I've always appreciated about Reading schools is that they have their own unique personality and culture. And you talk to any parent in town and they're like deeply attached to their, they will tell you that they're at the best school, which I think is just a testament to the strength of all our schools. But what I loved when I sat down to read all your school improvement plans was that clear collaborative effort. And I was like, wow, okay, like we're coming together, we're working on similar goals. And I think, if there's been any, complaint across schools, it's been like, well, why are they learning that there and not here? And why is that, when it comes to academics, more so than culture? So it's exciting to see the collaboration that is happening. Your enthusiasm like came through in droves tonight. So it's nice to see that you're on a really similar page with this stuff while still maintaining those unique cultures and personalities.
Great. If there's no further discussion, we did that a little bit out of order, but is there a motion?
That's okay.
Move to approve the elementary and middle school improvement plans.
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Okay, now I'll say, is there any further discussion? No. Seeing none. Okay, all in favor? All opposed? 5-0. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, it's a little earlier than we would usually do it, but we had a meeting before the meeting. Can we take just a quick 5-minute recess and then we'll wrap up our agenda?
Your call.
That's true. We are back in order at 8:39. I'm saying that for the timestamp for our minutes later. And the next item on our agenda is our math curriculum update. So Ms. Leonard, take it away.
Thank you all for the chance to come and visit. And I was saying to the principals, I think you already kind of teed me up and gave a lot of insight into what's been going on. So it's really exciting to hear that work reiterated at the school level, the work we're trying to do, across the district and across the levels. So tonight, I'm actually excited to share this focus on implementation. You've heard the building leaders reference the high-quality curriculum that we've been working to acquire, and now we're in this phase of implementing. So really thinking about what does that mean and look like. So I'm excited to really focus on that as I share a bit about where we are in math for this school year. And is there a trick to the clicker?
Just to point at AJ. That's the trick.
There we go. I know, I'm gonna just.
He just takes the signal and does it manually. No.
That's excellent. Okay, so I just wanted to do a reminder of when we're talking about the high-quality curriculum, often when people say curriculum, they picture, the shiny printed books you receive. But I really want to make sure that when we're using this term, that we're really including all the components of curriculum. So it is those tools and resources, and it's the instructional methodology, those routines our teachers are using as they're teaching it. It's the assessment that we're using in an ongoing way, both embedded and external, to continue to monitor student progress. It's that pacing, both within that daily-to-day lesson and also across the course of a year. It is really inherently deeply connected and built within those standards, both within the content standards and those practice standards we need. So note, when I'm talking about high-quality curriculum, this is all inclusive in all of those different routines that I'm framing when we're speaking about that piece. There we go. All right. So I just wanted to map out that curriculum landscape just as a reminder about where we're at. So when we're thinking about that experience of a mathematician going through the Reading Public Schools in kindergarten through high school, we've had just the great support to be able to invest in high quality resources. So students in kindergarten through 6th grade are utilizing the illustrative mathematics tools. And then in 7th grade up through Algebra 2, they're utilizing Envision Math. 7th and 8th are utilizing the 2021 and the Envision AGA up through those other courses. And this screenshot, what you'll actually see, those little green bars, those are just pulled from Ed reports, just as a quick reminder of, we know they're high quality because they're deeply connected to the standards, and we know they're inherently built on strong instructional practices, and we have the external validation of the strength of these tools to really rely on to build those curricular routines that we're utilizing in our math. Additionally, we have some other supplemental resources that are built in, some that are newer that we're continuing to build up, and some that are resources that we've had in place that we're continuing to utilize. So in kindergarten through 2nd grade, the Developing Number Concepts, which is written by Kathy Richardson, that had been in place, is continued additional supplemental support, which is great for our tiered intervention. We also have invested over the last few years in acquiring Do the Math, which is written by Marilyn Burns, which is another really great supplemental resource that can be utilized from Tier 2, Tier 3, and in special education, should it be needed, up through 6th grade and beyond, actually. So they're really built on these foundational mathematical skills from like understanding number sense, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and rational numbers. So it's, again, a really nice resource that we've been able to acquire and provide for our schools and our teachers across. And then there's additionally built-in intervention resources that are built within the Envision model. And I share this snapshot because often when we talk about curriculum resources, we talk about the core components, but I really want to share that landscape is there's a lot of strong tools that have helped us to build up our program over the last few years that I think we're really working from an incredibly strong foundation as far as the resources go. Yeah?
Sure.
I asked this question from a point of ignorance.
Sure.
I really don't know. Do the Math, does it support students with dyscalculia?
Actually, I'm glad you bring that. I'm going to come back to that if that's okay. So I'm going to talk about that later on, and when I get to it, if I don't answer your question, make sure you ask me again. Okay. All right. So as you're thinking about that map, I just wanted to name one of the principles also named as high-quality curriculum evaluation process, just as a reminder of where we are. So grade 3 and through 8 and into high school are really in that implement and monitor phase, and grade K through 2 is almost in that stage. Now that we have these tools, we're in this implementation step of this process. That it's not just, as you all know, it's not just about buying and getting the stuff, and now the work is done. We're actually still in this process of adopting this high-quality curriculum, and in my opinion, in the most critical phase. And this is really where it's, what does it look like when we're applying these rich tools and instructional practices in our classrooms? In this implement and monitor phase, it's twofold. The implementation is really around that training and making sure that everyone that has access to these new resources and instructional methodologies really deeply understands what it should look like, how it should sound, how do I make these moves, what decisions am I making, and that we're continually monitoring. And that monitoring is both at a student level, how are our students doing, and at an instructional level, how are our educators doing, how are our leaders doing, what do we need to adjust, what additional supports do we need, and that this. In fact, the Implement MA process names it as being a 1 to 4 year process to expect to be in that implement and monitor phase. So that's really appropriately where we are in grades K through 8 and beyond in mathematics. So I just wanted to share again this framing about the different curriculum tools we have. So illustrative math as our K through 6 resource is really this problem. It's a problem-based mathematics curriculum, as I've shared with you all in the past. It really gets students to do the math. They're getting a chance to learn by trying it, by asking questions, by getting messy, by making mistakes, by exploring, by hearing from each other. And the whole structure of the program is built on this idea that every lesson, every unit, and every grade level has a warm invitation into the mathematics to make it accessible for all so students feel excited and engaged and connected. Then there's a deep study of the concepts, of the procedures, of the work that happens during the activities in the lesson. And then it's that consolidation and applying. So it's switching from that traditional method of I do, we do, you do, right? Like the teacher does it, then you mimic, do it together, and then you practice the same thing I did 20 times, and now you can math. And shifting it into, what do we know about this? What do we wonder about this? How could we try it? What are the different approaches? And getting to that synthesizing of the learning, and that's really where you take all those different pieces and you link them together to really stamp that learning and help students to own that next step in that skill development and that concept understanding. So I had a few students who were willing to share from their perspective what the math, how math looks and sounds and feels. So I'm going to let them share with you about this, and bear with us because the audio is, we're going to roll with it, right, AJ? All right, so here we go.
And then it's like writing stuff down in our workbooks, like writing what we're supposed to do down in our workbooks, paying attention to each other, and listening to each other.
Go ahead.
Students act as coaches. Coaching each other, helping each other build confidence. So there's that connection to the vocabulary that we heard. I don't know if you heard that. It sounds like people making mistakes and learning from them.
Sometimes like lying, like or like thinking or like questions. for me, everybody's focusing on their own work and they're focusing on their own work and other people's other. Math class to be feels fun, but sometimes you have to think hard to do like this. Math class doesn't look at how we're going to figure out. Math class to me feels fun because we usually don't want to play games. Math class to me feels like it helps me hold it from each other.
So I just want to shout out these fabulous fourth graders from Miss Mooch's class. I know it's a little hard to hear some of the audio, but some of the things I loved is that you can feel proud because when you make a mistake that you can learn from it, that students are talking and coaching with each other. Sometimes it's quiet and sometimes students, you're learning and hearing from each other. Sometimes it's fun because it's games. So I think they can really say it well that the feelings and the experiences of being in the math class probably is different than maybe what I can say what I experienced as a math student when I went through my math education. So it's just a nice reminder that the math is the same, right? Numbers, the digits haven't changed, the process of multiplication hasn't changed, but the way we're experiencing it and asking students to gain their understanding is really what's shifted here. And thanks, AJ, for helping with that audio. And then the Envision curriculum tool. So Envision is also based in a problem-based learning structure, and it really moves students through this idea of away from that idea that repetition equals understanding, and moving into exploring those deep problems, thinking about them critically, applying skills that you have to maybe some novel situations and real-life connected situations. Does a lot of work with visualizing, especially in middle school and beyond when you move into these more complex ideas and understandings. If you can't really picture it, if you don't have a model for what that might mean, the really good check in mathematics, right? Does that answer make sense? You can't sense make if you don't understand what you're doing. And so this program really takes students through the process, like I am, of exploring through problem-based learning, building their skills and their understanding, and then creating those models and visuals so they can really go back into that math. Does that make sense? Does that answer connect with what this could be? And the program itself then moves into that more mature process of the differentiation access. There's a lot of enhanced virtual tools within this, both models, animation. There's great routines, which are 3-act tasks, which are a great math routine, and maybe I'll have some middle schoolers come and lead you through that another time. That would be great. And some rich embedded online resources like Desmos, which is a wonderful virtual platform to support mathematical understanding and beyond. So again, it really follows that process of the problem-based learning through mathematics, which really pushes forward that understanding and applying in novel situations while building skills and fluency within those core mathematical frames. So this is where we're talking about the implementation. It's really around that professional learning. And I don't just mean a one-day stand and deliver PD, because professional learning happens inherently when we talk through difficult situations, when teachers collaborate with each other, when teachers collaborate vertically, when they learn from folks outside, when they read new things. But I think really critically, the professional learning partner guide that DESE recommends is really focused on, if you're going to do this work, it is just absolutely critical that professional learning is a keystone in that implementation work. So with the illustrative math work, we've partnered for the year one with the illustrative math to have the certified trainers come here, and we've been lucky enough to partner with Maureen O'Connell, who's a certified math IM trainer from their program, and is a local Massachusetts teacher who's actually taught it. So she can actually come in and be like, here's what the program says, and here's what my experience has been. And we've had the lucky opportunity this year to be in person to do that work together. So teachers from across the schools get together on these professional learning days to understand both the why the program is structured the way it is, what does the research tell us, and it's really inherently built on what does the current research tell us about how students learn math, what does those common core standards mean, and then what do our practices need to look like in order to facilitate that learning. And then you get the benefit of that cross-pollination across schools and across grade levels, teachers collaborating and working through together as we move through this process. One of the principals mentioned we've already had a few of these days over the course of the year. We have another date in January and another date in the spring that these teachers will get a chance to work with our certified IM trainer. You've also heard all across the levels, our principals mention this idea of learning labs. So the learning lab structure is actually really exciting. And I reached out to Dr. Mike Flynn, who is, he's formerly a professor at Mount Holyoke, and he's built a lot of programming around math education. And he offers this structure, and we've partnered with him and worked with the trainer, Jen Hawkins, to come in and do this idea of a learning lab. And what that means is for a day, across the buildings, across the district, all of the teachers from grade 3, all from grade 4, and we've done this from grade 3 up through grade 8. So anyone who's in implementation year 2 or beyond, we got together as a full grade level at a school, and we dug in, what is the next lesson that that teacher would be teaching? So the person that comes in, they're curriculum agnostic. What's the next lesson? And we enter that lesson into, what do we know good practices are? What does that say? What is the standard expecting? How will we know if our students are getting it? We go in and the trainer teaches it, and then we get back together. What worked well? What will we wish we had changed? What did you notice about students? What teacher moves led to the student thinking outcome we're expecting? Then we replan the lesson together as a whole group, and we go back in and the teachers teach it. So you can see in some of these pictures our Reading teachers teaching components of the lesson. They're teaching not necessarily their own class and in front of their peers. So that's really asking teachers to build a level of trust with each other, to be vulnerable. For almost all of them, they're saying, I can teach in front of groups of kids all day, but teaching in front of other adults, that's really difficult. So we're opening up our own practice to be more vulnerable and sharing our strategies. And then we get back together again. What did we notice? What teacher moves do we really want to hang on to? What strategies do we find successful? Which then lets the teachers go into, how are you then going to plan to integrate that instructional routine in your own lesson planning as we move forward? So it's taking the theoretical learning you do in that year 1 and moving it towards the application with our kids, with our resources, with our time. I mean, even in one of the middle school days, we actually did it on an early release day. So we had like 30 minutes to try it, and we did it. So it was really powerful to see, like, even within our restrictions, what can we do to make sure we're providing that opportunity for those powerful learning experiences. So all those grade levels each had one day this fall, and we have another day that's coming up February and March, each of those grade levels, to collaborate with each other to do this work again, which I think answers one of the questions asked before, how are we making sure we're doing that work across schools? It's really inherently through these experiences together, through the work. Right, using these rich tools collaboratively and struggling authentically. Sometimes there are hard things that happen. In one of these pieces, part of the lesson didn't go well. So we had an awesome opportunity to talk about what didn't work, why, how might we change it? And our teachers can go in knowing it's not about being perfect every day, it's about making sure we're being reflective about our practice and using those strategies and tools that we're building to improve and plan forward, and using information we get from our students to be strategic. And the bonus then, you have teachers that reach out to each other. I saw you do that, or I heard you mention this, and how could we build those professional learning networks within the schools and across? So this is the one that, Tom, I asked you to hang on to it for now. An additional piece of the PD of this implementation work we're doing is really explicitly targeting our middle school special education teachers. In all of the PD that's included, the illustrative math work, the learning lab work, our special educators are part of the team. They're in there working with their teachers and the general education colleagues. Additionally, with the investment in the Do the Math program, we purchased it, and we did 3 full days of training last year with our elementary. And this year, what we decided to take this pivot on this decoding math. So Do the Math is inherently designed to be a versatile program that can work in a range of settings. So it's not only used for special education. It can be used. Sometimes it's used as like a summer school program. Sometimes it's used in Tier 2, and you can use those tools in Tier 3 and special ed because it's designed through a pre-assessment that lets you enter in to target what skills are lacking, and then gives you really structured 30-minute modules to work students through. So it's really targeted and built on those key skills. The training that we did at that time was really on the use of the program. What are the components of the program? What does that look like? How do we ask students to enter in? And it might be that a student might be working at a Tier 2 intervention at, a grade 2 that might be a more targeted special education resource usage for a student who might have a skill deficit in grade 5. So that training was more on the program. This work we're doing this year with Decoding Math is really focused around understanding the neuroscience of math, focusing on dyscalculia, and thinking what are those effective instructional moves that you can make that when you're making decisions about both service delivery, how and when students are getting support they need, and then the resource selection, how are we identifying the skill need to make sure we're targeting that skill and moving students forward in their mathematical understanding. And this work was partnered with the acquisition of some of those tools for middle school so that they can, again, be more strategic. So it's not just more math, but it's skill development in that really targeted and focused area that those students might be struggling. So does that answer the question that you had before?
It does, and I'm happy to hear, the first part of it in particular. I was a little worried looking at it that this is middle school only, but the first part that it's K through 6 as well as the middle school side of it is reassuring. I'll say this as well. I mean, a lot of the science around both dyslexia and dysgraphia and dyscalculia is about tactile things, and seeing some of the pictures about how just the core instruction is happening in a tactile learning type environment is also very encouraging to see in this space. So thank you again for continuing to move that ball forward. I'd love to see our Crafting Mind stuff go down to the elementary levels. We need to move that down. It can't just be middle school. I know there's a lot of work we're doing overall, but we need to make sure that we're front loading, not back loading some of the stuff.
And I think it's simultaneous too, right? I think the reason this works right now is that we've had the core resource tool at the middle schools for a little while, and somewhat like we're in year 1 at K1 too. So I also think there's value. I don't want to diminish the value of our special educators deeply understanding what does that core resource look like, sound like, how does it teach math, what's the structure? Because is it a matter of, do I just need to accommodate within because there's inherent components built in, or do I need to significantly modify? And I can't know that as a special educator if I don't deeply understand the way that's built. So it's step 1, understanding that core tool, what does it look like? What are the pieces that are already built in? And then I think that next piece is really where we do need to continue to head. Then how do we move into that more specialized area? And do I know what resources really align with student need? So I think that is, I agree with you, and I think it's on the trajectory of the work. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Just following up on that point, I think also so critical for our gen ed classroom teachers to also have those tools, because often those ways of teaching benefit all learners and all students, and being able to come at it through a different angle helps just deepen their every student's understanding.
100%, and we know universal design inherently says if it's good for some, it's likely for all. And so I think, again, there's that piece of what are those instructional moves that are baked into the program that we want to make sure are done with integrity across. And when we have learners who might learn differently or have specialized needs, how do we make sure that all staff that work with them have the tools and capacity? Again, that's where, when we're talking about implementation, that's why the process is 4-year, right? First year is like, I don't even know what I'm doing. How do I find this piece? What does that progression look like? Year 2 really is like, we're almost troubleshooting. Is this feeling right? Is this sounding right? Am I building my confidence as a facilitator of mathematics? And as we go, I think we get to that nuanced need. We are having increases of multilingual learners. What does math look like, sound like, feel like if I don't necessarily have a great deal of English experience and I'm in this math class that's taught in English? What does it look like if I'm a student who has dyscalculia and I'm in this problem-based learning? So I think the more we go with this implementation, it just helps us to be more robust as for all of our educators and students to think about that full picture. So I thank you both for naming that. And then the last piece I want to name is that leadership piece. So the work here that's really been a lot of excitement for me is that there's a lot of work that's happened across the state with a lot of the shifts in the curriculum. So there's inherently great networks. It was just yesterday, I was actually in Marlborough with the STEM state leaders, and it was really phenomenal to connect both casually and formally with leaders across the state doing this work. Last year, additionally, I put out to the Math Leader Network, like, hey, if anyone else is doing IM, love to collaborate, because it's a pretty big shift, and had a lot of people that were interested. So we created this IM Leader Network of a bunch of our districts from around the state. We had our first meeting, was that 2 weeks ago, Sarah? We had 36 districts come to this group that started as like a casual group of a few of us that's really grown. So I'm so thrilled, and the more we're sharing, collaborating, getting good ideas, how can we connect resources? What does that ongoing work look like as we onboard new teachers? How can we connect? So we're really starting to build these professional learning networks for leaders, which is exciting. Also, the work that the district is focusing on in rigorous instruction just inherently ties with leader learning. What does it mean to have a rigorous math classroom? What does that classroom look like and sound like? And we will be having a leader training for the illustrative mathematics coming up in February. And then the last piece I'm excited to share is a Wakefield partnership. So Wakefield also adopted IM. So I've been connecting, you see the little picture of the four of us. We've been connecting over the last year and a half. And to really, some of it is just to share, like, what does your implementation team do? Oh, I found this great resource. Here are these other ideas. But now we're actually really excited to be working collaboratively on a few different ideas, including how we starting to connect with our communities. So what might that look like, and what do those spaces look like? Additionally, we're starting to talk about, like, how can we even open up the doors to build our teachers' learning networks? So there's going to be having a few of their fourth grade teachers come actually to our district in 2 weeks to come to some of our classrooms to see what does it look like, sound like, and connect. So again, we're just building out those professional learning opportunities because we know you're not done. So the more we can build these networks that folks can lean into, I think the better we'll all benefit from that. So that's really exciting and a fun spot for all of our professional mathematicians here. And the last piece of professional learning that I think selfishly is the one that I get so much from is the math implementation team. It's a group of teachers across schools in grades that get together and talk about, you know, how are we doing on our 5-year goals? How are we doing on our goals and our needs for this year? Some of it's literal troubleshooting, and some of it's really visionary work. How do we support when we have new students coming in? What does it look like if one of our teacher colleagues is struggling in this area? And this network is so awesome, and they share with each other. Yesterday, was it yesterday we met? The question was, what challenges are we all facing? And we were in the challenge conversation for about 5 minutes, and they spent like solution conversation for about 20 minutes sharing all these different strategies, like, oh, I just want to bottle it. And that's what we're literally hoping to do. So they're connecting with their peers and colleagues on an ongoing basis in their schools. We're connecting with each other, share across schools, once again, making sure that this isn't done in silos, either at grades or in buildings, that this is a district-wide effort. So I just want to shout out this team and all their work, because they're really, it's not easy to do this work, and they're willing to be vulnerable and be peer leaders in this effort. So they're an outstanding group. And the coming soon and future work. Before I mention this, I was just realizing I heard Sarah in her intro wanting to shout out those 3 through 5 teachers. I want to doubly shout them out because they're in year 2 of implementing IM, which is amazing. And I also want to celebrate our K-1-2 teachers who are making significant changes in mathematics, many of whom maybe math wasn't something, I don't want to say many of whom, but I think there's a varied level of experience or comfort in mathematics, and these K-1-2 teachers, they're doing this work that is incredibly rich, incredibly rigorous, very mathematical, language heavy, and they're doing such a phenomenal job with their implementation too. So I just also wanted to acknowledge that their work has really been outstanding in times that they're supporting our students as they're working through this new learning. So coming soon, this family community engagement, I gave you a little hint that that's something that partnering with Wakefield to look at what could that look like, both for an overview presentation for our community and some possible hands-on math experiences, more to come. Some work that's going to be coming up over the next year is with the implementation of these new curriculum areas. There's a need for some revision and updates to different curriculum documents, both externally public-facing, like curriculum guides, and internal work, like pacing guides or assessments. That the reason we don't do it in year 1 or year 2 is because we need to get good at it to know how do we communicate it, and are there choices we need to make within Reading. So that's coming. The work with our math assessments as well. We have some external assessments using math, which I think is a great band for us to do our monitoring. We have the same assessments we had before we use these tools. What does that performance look like now that we're implementing this new curriculum? So making sure we're continuing that work and supporting that data analysis to monitor and make adjustments to our implementation work. And the ongoing work of the professional learning. I mentioned only briefly middle, but I just wanted to name that their adoption, and while we required their tool years ago, we acquired their tool in 2020. So their first few years of rollout didn't look like this level of depth when it came to implementation of the tool. So I see this as a little bit of a reset and recharge in our middle schools when we're thinking about, when we have these curriculum tools which demand this instructional methodology shift, and how do we collaborate and combine our efforts in that work, both in the problem-based through line that goes grades 6 through, and in making sure that we're leaning into those high-quality curriculum resources in a consistent manner. So that reboot's happening as well, just based on when that implementation or that acquisition of the tool happened. And that's it. So that's all for me. If there are any questions that weren't asked, and this student sort of was talking through math, but I just, you can watch them do some of their work. And again, it goes back to what you're mentioning, that manipulation, that concrete move to then the pictorial, eventually moving them to that abstract thinking, which is just inherently built in. So I'm happy if there's any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. This is awesome. Quick question about, I noticed you had the implementation team leads, it looks like for K-5 implementation for our elementary crew. Is there a similar effort at the middle school level for Envision for 7th, 8th, or whatever grades? Having those building leaders and champions working together?
Great question. At this point, because in the middle they're content specialists, when they do math, they do math and they don't do other curricular resources. So we've been really working hard, and Dr. Hardy and I have been working with the middle school principals to lean into that middle school math department to think about how can we work collaboratively with our curriculum lead there to move into utilizing these rich resources. Where are we finding these instructional routines? How does that inform our classroom instruction? Partnered with, when we're doing those learning lab days as well, making sure that we have the cross building and with the special educators who also support. So as of now, that's really living in the departmental meetings. I think, as we go, both with supporting new educators that may not have been here when we first implemented, and as a district-wide team, increasing our consistency of implementation, I think some of that more nuanced leadership piece, I think there could be some benefit, whether it's building level or class level. Because even though we're talking about grade 7 and 8, we have a grade 7 class, we have a 7-8 class, we have an 8 class, and we have an Algebra 1 class. So there's 4 courses within those 2 grade levels as well. So I think there's a lot to unpack there. But as of now, that work is really being done with all at the department level.
Go ahead, sorry.
If you had a question.
I do, but I'll hold it. I know nobody's going to ask my question, so I'll hold it.
Oh, okay. Now it's a challenge.
I'm not saying it's a great one. I'm just saying I think it's a unique one, that's all.
So first of all, I want to say thank you as well, and I want to applaud the continuous improvement mindset and process, right? Both for the teachers for opening themselves up for that, and for, the way that you're going about implementing this and overall, embracing that, not just within Reading, but outside Reading as well, the Wakefield and at the state level. So I just want to thank you for that. The thing that seems to me to be glaringly obviously absent from the next steps may or may not be in your, remit, considering your K through 8 necessarily, but math tracks, right? You just you hit the nail on the head with the last answer to Sarah's question about the 4 levels that are at the middle school, and unpacking that, and the answer may be over there as well as it is with you, but where does that stand in the next steps here? And as part of the answer to that, Envision includes geometry and algebra 2, which is the high school side of things, and how does that fit into this whole picture?
Great question. The reason you didn't see that in next steps is because this is focused on implementation of curriculum tools, and I think the conversation about math pathways, I think it's a parallel conversation, but not necessarily about the tool, because the course offerings have been in place for a while, and the way the trajectory has been in place for a while has been there regardless of the tool switching out. What I can say is there isn't an answer that lies anywhere yet, but there's great work that's happening that's already started. We started it last winter, maybe, just to start the conversation about what currently exists, what are the problems that are out there, what are the successes that we find, who's finding success in there, who needs to be at the table part of the conversation. So we've just really moved into this idea of what would that long-term planning look like? Really, and the beautiful thing is, and I mentioned yesterday being at the STEM Leader Network, I was with Allison Williams, who's the high school department head as well, is the state's reinvigorating their work on math pathways as well. So I had connected with the math content lead for DESE a few months ago just to ask for insight. She's like, you're really well timed. We were literally just starting this work in DESE. So we're actually really in a great place to be having these critical conversations and the examination of what we have, what does that success pathway look like? How do we make sure all students have that right and that access to equitable and rich and challenging math learning throughout their courses? So those questions are happening, the conversations are starting, but I think it's a piece that it's a really broad it's a conversation that has a really wide impact net. So it's going to include across levels. It's going to include students and parents and teachers and administrators. And it's going to be something that's not going to be a short or simple work. So really we're in the place of mapping out is what is that process of examining the math pathways going to look like? What's realistic time-wise? And really using what does the research say? What is our data showing us? What is the work that's coming out of the state? And building, again, our network. So one of our breakout groups yesterday was math pathways. I went, to that one specifically, and again, there were over 30 districts having this conversation right now. So we're really well poised, and we're in a really good place to examine this work. I wouldn't say there's answers yet, but there's folks who understand that it's something that needs to be examined, needs to be looked into, and really thoughtfully approached, both from what does it say, from what does research say, and what does the state say, and what does Reading students telling us, what is the data showing us, and what do we need to make sure we're doing. So the work is starting, but there isn't a clean answer to that.
Just following up on that question, and it might be again more for the two of you, as we just saw in the middle school improvement plans, there's basically a focus on implementing the resources, right? And Heather just mentioned how 2 years ago they didn't really have support in COVID, right? Same things at the high school. We are not consistently implementing the resources at the high school either. Are we working with Allison and, trying to work that through and improve that implementation so that they are using these high quality resources that we've given them, as opposed to the books that were from 20 years ago that are still there?
So I'll say our focus this year, kind of in bringing the high school departments in line with some of the rich work that's happened at elementary and beginning at middle school, is to introduce this idea of, first and foremost, a curriculum review process for folks and departments who are considering moving to new materials, and then starting with our department heads to look at what instruction is happening in their department through the lens of rigorous instruction. In particular, I can tell you that one of the summer projects that was done by the math department was to start looking at how their assessments are aligning across those programs, and then looking at their scope and sequence across their units. So the work is still really at the beginning level. Right now, when we meet with that instructional leadership team at the high school, our focus has been on looking at our instructional practices. More work is coming as we start to document and sort of solidify what our curriculum review process is. Just to clarify, that would impact the math department, even though they may have an existing tool, and even though we may not be looking at triggering that process to purchase a new material, because as back to Heather's beautiful graphic at the beginning, curriculum review process is not just about the material, although that is part of it, but it's also about what are the instructional methods that are being used, what is our scope and sequence, how is it standards aligned. So we're really just at the beginning of that work at the high school, but I completely agree with you. That is a need for us, and that's definitely a next step. And I think that we're seeing, what we're seeing at the high school from the department heads this year is encouraging. We feel like that work is, is something that they're on board for and excited to take a little bit of a deeper look. In the past, there wasn't perhaps always an expectation of consistency in the department, or an expectation even that central office would be involved in curricular decisions. And so I think our department heads have shown, an eagerness for that support and collaborative work.
One final point or question on here is it strikes me as we have this conversation that we've had Heather in here probably for the last 5 years, once or twice a year, talking us through K through 8. Not once in the last 5 or 6 years have we had the high school direct, in here talking us through 9 through 12. I think we need to change that and have that this kind of conversation happen for the high school as well, so we can have these conversations that are rich, that are showing the demonstration of the work that's happening, that are in some cases challenging the work that's happening. And as we have formed the department chairs and given them a little bit more structure, and as we think about things going forward, I think that's something as a point of improvement for us in our process as well that I would love to see us implement.
It's a great suggestion.
I'd love to add the plug too, that I think, as we've started to do the work of acquiring things and in making sure that we're really fluent in understanding what we're asked students to do and what does that look like, that ending of 8 into 9, there's an obligation on my role as well to make sure that it doesn't they're gone now, best of luck, right? So that the actual through line, that dream, right, is that we're talking about that pre-K through 12 plus experience and how we, so really thinking through, the more we can think about the experiences of our students as a mathematician going through the Reading Public Schools from age 2.9 up through 22, what is my experience?
Right.
And so making sure that it's also not, we try as hard as we can to remove those silos. And I think the acquisition of resources and the support we're getting from central office to do that work helps us to move forward, because now at least we have a common foundation to start that vertical conversation, where before it was more isolated because there was a lot of independent choice of both how we're doing, what we're doing, when we're doing. So it really lets us start to open up a dialogue in a common way. So, I think there's ownership in my role as well to make sure that that goes through, if the through line isn't just ending.
100% agree, and I think that's where this conversation, when it's a math presentation, it's you and Allison. When it's a science presentation, it's you and, I'm going to blank, maybe Carla remembers.
Ray.
Right, it's you and Ray. When it's an ELA conversation, it's Aaron and Allison again. Whoever, that we make sure that through line is there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be distinct presentation. Maybe it could be because their time doesn't allow, but as much as we do have that vertical alignment, we've talked about horizontal alignment and vertical alignment pretty much all night, and it's great to see and think about that as we go.
And I think we're moving there, and I think the work that is happening at the levels the instructional leadership teams do, again, it's really opening up the doors to normalize the conversations about the teaching and learning and the what we're doing and how, and the better we get at this, it's almost going to create a demand to do that. So I think we're well poised to start that routine. So, yeah.
Wow, everybody looked at me in a hurry there. So my question, a little bit of an extension of the conversation we had, when we were with Sarah at our school visit, observing the IM implementation. And just to summarize, there was a discussion about that invitation to math piece and how it feels different at the beginning of the unit than the I do, we do, you do sort of model. It occurs to me, this is a hypothesis that I have, and I think it's correct, but I'm curious whether you agree with the premise, that, there are students who have thrived in the I do, we do, you do model, this may be the first time that they find math challenging, right? Or really challenging. And at the same time, those students might still actually be doing okay, so it may not show up in assessments necessarily. How do we, and it's probably a question for Dr. Hardy as well, but how do we train teachers to be able to identify those instances where students may be at risk of losing confidence, even if they're still competent, where they're at risk of losing confidence? Just to personalize it, and we talked about this was my experience with my fourth grade daughter is, she talks about how she sucks at math all the time, and she doesn't, and I know that. But I'm in a position of understanding that we're in the middle of a math implementation and being able to connect those dots. And I'm curious how or whether teachers are really sort of in a position to be able to identify those cases and intervene where necessary.
That's a really good question. I think so I think I would add a layer to the presentation you gave of, the students who would thrive in that work. I don't want to diminish it. I know it's how I learned math, but it's almost the mathematical mimicry.
Yeah.
If I can mimic what my teacher does, I'm going to find success, right? So if I can just apply this. What would often happen for those students who felt strong in that model is they would hit the breakdown about middle school or in high school, because then what's happening is you're getting novel situations, you're getting situations that you haven't seen before or the teacher didn't show you how to do, and you freeze. And so you would often find those students who saw themselves as strong mathematicians hit a wall, upper middle school, early high school, and then we would lose am I feeling that? Right? So then what you would do is your confidence crash would happen, but would happen later, and then you lose those folks out of STEM fields, out of math passion, and they're probably highly competent and potentially really strong mathematicians. Well, they all could be, right? So I think what's happening is that understanding of where your confidence comes from is really that confidence to make mistakes publicly and revise our thinking. And that comes from doing it over and over and over again. again. And so what we've done to your daughter who's in 4th grade is we've thrown her in after we're assuming she's had K 1, 2, 3 years of experience doing that, but we're putting her in more complex math and now asking to be vulnerable and take risks, whereas in K, they're doing it every day from day one when they get into math. So part of that work, and frankly, we're asking our teachers to do it too, because there's a lot of vulnerability and risk-taking because you're asking, the learning's happening from students sharing their understanding and those teachers coaching and facilitating that moves, so it's far less controlled. So a student might share something, and it's really easy to go, I have no idea what you're saying, because the way they see a problem is just so different and unique. So there's a level of vulnerability that I think is happening for our educators and our students that we don't want to lose them in it. And so I think there's a bit of that building that math community and that norming of like, where do we find those feel-good spots? How do we make sure we're acknowledging and raising up students for the feelings of success and expecting failure as a learning space so that we know that getting everything right isn't the goal. Having really good ideas that you're willing to share is, and listening and learning from others so we can move towards strong thinking and efficiency. But that's a code shift that, especially for students who really pride themselves on like the rule, following those rules and doing really well and being, you know, I'm going to do what that teacher tells me to do. This literally doesn't, the teacher's not going to tell you how to do it. And that's going to create a lot of discomfort. So I'm hopeful that the more practice and opportunity and space that's given, that those students will really understand that like, this is what good mathematicians do. And you're a good mathematician because it feels hard, because you're willing to do that hard work. I think conversations about it, both with the teacher, with families, and with us as a district as a whole, are really helpful for us to think about what does that look like and how can we help, you know, have that math talk, that internal math talk, that good mathematicians struggle. So it's a great question with a really not clean, messy answer. But I would just challenge, I think if it feels uncomfortable now's a good time to feel uncomfortable rather than maybe, what grades?
9.
Yeah.
10, 11.
7, 8, 9, yeah. Around those times where often we would lose those same folks that might be struggling now. Yeah. It's highly likely that that would have happened just a few years later in a place that there's a lot less of a safety net to recover and build that confidence back up. So point well taken, and something for us to be mindful about with that social emotional lens. But I think it's probably something we've been dealing with, just maybe we haven't seen it as early as now.
Makes sense. Yeah. So I should have said, you know, when I was planning this question in my head before I held it for too long, I was going to say, I believe that I do believe it's the right approach, even for kids, you know, for kids like mine, and to break them out of that mold. And what I often tell people when I talk about them, I am with them is, you know, that person you think of who's like just the best you know at math, you know, and just gets math. This is how they understand math, right? Like it's, you know, they, you know, there are also people who did well in school in math who, you know, just memorized well or learned the steps well. But the one, you know, that really gets math and like, you know, can apply it in lots of different settings and sees it everywhere and whatever, this is how they understand it.
And we all still can, right, Sarah? Like we talked about this, like you still can, like playing around with it and exploring puzzles and listening to conversations. Like it's not like it stopped. Like you're not just like, you got good at it. Right. So I think that invitation is continuing to be there for adults as well. And I think framing that too, that, you know, the more we explore, the more we mess around with it, the more we get our hands dirty, wherever you are in that process. I think you're right. That's what helps somebody be a mather, right? That you really feel that the way you look at something is sort of like an interesting puzzle to grapple with rather than something I should just know. Yeah. So.
Like if the way USA Today draws a graph doesn't make you mad, you're not a mather.
Just to add one thing, one example I was thinking of is Heather was talking about how through professional development, we're trying to help teachers build that math community within their classroom. I saw that explicitly in one of our K-2 trainings where they were talking about like, how do you have this conversation with your students, which came out in some of the things our kids said about like what they feel and hear in their math classes. But particularly in one of the learning labs, I think it was the 4th grade, as they were preparing to go in, the coach was having the teachers think about like, as the students are in that exploratory part of the lesson, you as the teacher, your goal there is to be walking around, you know, supporting and prompting, but listening and really listening for kids who have those like great comments, and then to elevate those voices when you come back and you start to synthesize that work, because sometimes you will have students who are playing around with an idea and aren't feeling confident, because they may not think I've quite arrived there. So some of that professional learning is being embedded for teachers through that sense of how do we get all students to participate and to be able to celebrate the thinking that they're doing. So I just made that connection as Heather was describing that. I think that's some of the work we need to do with our teachers to help them understand how that impacts how students are feeling.
Just on building on that, sometimes the best listening is listening to silence, right? When a student is not engaging, the same thing happens in reading, right? They're actually there, the book's upside down, they're trying to pretend like they look like they're reading, but they're not. It's the silence in that case. So in the math case, is the student silent in the conversation? There's something there that you want to touch on and bolster up for that student in particular.
I think that's the great thing about this work that's happening up through 8th grade, is that it's very hard when we're implementing these curriculum routines and the instructional methodology. It becomes almost impossible to be a passive member of the class because of the way we're engaging in math. So that comes out real quick. Because what it isn't is sitting and doing things quietly. Like it's messy, it's noisy, it's engaged, it's active. So it's much harder to not. And if it does happen, it's a real quick interruption of that routine from a teacher because of the way we're teaching math now. So thanks for naming that too.
Anything else? Okay.
Well, I always love coming to chat math, so thank you again for the time and the opportunity, and just another shout out to the amazing work that's happening in all of these classrooms, the teachers digging into this hard work. They're doing a great job, so thank you.
Thanks,
Have a good day.
I'd also just like to thank Heather, too. I mean, leading work around curriculum, instruction, assessments, PD across 7 schools and 9 grade levels is just, I know there's an absolute ton on your plate, and is doing the work so well. So I just appreciate everything that Heather does on behalf of our district. There's a lot that you're leading, and I think also in a really exciting, encouraging direction. So thank you to you and all your work.
Thank you.
Shine through tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we will move on and wrap with what feels like a lot of policies, but hopefully will be some relatively brief discussion. Tom, why don't we start with JHBA, just because it's a little bit different than the others, and I'll ask you to just sort of provide an overview of where we are on this one and why we're here tonight.
Sure. So this one in particular came up as a result of the Administrative Attendance Committee's work last year. As they were looking at attendance and they were looking at trying to figure out how do we bring students back and allow them to make up work, there was a concern with this policy in particular and how broadly it could be interpreted and whether or not we even wanted it in the first place. In particular, the no makeup or credit will be allowed for work missed during the time of truancy. Was what Katie Buckley highlighted as a concern for Dr. Stice, and Dr. Stice brought to the policy committee. In our first meeting on this topic back in September, the committee gave the assessment or the ruling that this was a very narrowly focused policy, that it doesn't apply to every potential point of truancy. It's for specific things of skip days. But we agreed that we would take this away and see if this is even something we wanted to consider full revocation of. We followed up afterwards with legal on this policy, and legal's recommendation is to remove it as well. MASC does not have this policy. Inherent one-day in-school suspension that's built into it as well is arguably illegal. At least there is a due process hearing, but there's almost a default one-day suspension, and that's illegal as well. So as a result, legal recommended that we should revoke this policy. This subcommittee met on this on the 16th of November, if I recall correctly, and we had a brief discussion with Dr. Stice as well, reviewed the legal recommendation, and by a vote of 3-0, recommended the school committee as a whole agree to revoke this policy and remove it from our policy manual completely.
Let's take a motion, and then we'll see if there's any additional discussion.
Move to revoke policy JHBA.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Aaron. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? All opposed, 5-0. Okay, it's revoked. And then, Tom, maybe we can do one at a time. There'll be quick discussions for some of them, but we'll just move to JE.
Sure. Let me see if I could just share the whole screen so I don't have to keep flipping back and forth. So JE is the next one. That's student attendance. This one came up in the same context of the administrative attendance committee. Just to review it, to make sure it was aligned with what we wanted. And there really are not many changes to this one. There are really grammatical changes only in this particular case. It was reviewed by legal as well, and they had no additional changes to it. So at our meeting on November 16th, after the grammatical changes were made, inclusive of the he, she to they, and a few other things along those lines, we voted 3-0 to recommend the adoption of the amended policy that you see before you.
So for these four, for this one and the next three, we'll have to do a first reading tonight, and I have to apologize, because Tom sent these to me in time for me to give everybody the 1 week notice, but I didn't read the email carefully enough until after Thanksgiving, and so we have to do a first reading and a second reading as a result, so that's on me. So we'll start a first reading on JE, and then see if there's any discussion, and we'll come back and do second readings on these in our next meeting.
Student attendance, the Reading School Committee and the
Move
Reading.
to waive the reading. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Aaron. Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Okay, so we'll waive the reading. Any discussion on JE this evening? And we will have a second reading at our next meeting. Okay. Great, so we'll move on then to JH. Tom, if you want to give an intro, and we'll do the same sort of style here.
Sure. This one is more substantive from a change perspective. Also came up as a result of the previously mentioned administrative attendance committee from the prior year. This one, we went back and looked at the MASC policy for it, and there were very significant changes to the MASC policy, so we incorporated those changes into our policy. We then reviewed or sent that edited version off to legal for their adjustments, and they added one or two small points, in particular the benefits of earning a high school diploma. So Dr. Milichewski, if anybody wants to withdraw, you have to make sure you tell them about that. We then made a few minor adjustments from a parents and guardians perspective and things along those lines that have become our standards. I think there might be one or two cases in here that I was reviewing as I was trying to summarize where we might have missed parent or guardian, so we can double check for that as we go through it. But otherwise, that's the essence here. One other key point of the discussion that we had, you may remember that there was a conversation in the school handbook, in particular around rules with regards to notes for sicknesses for students. We decided not to put that in the policy, despite the fact that there was a heavy agreement by the committee that is the policy that we wanted to put in place. In particular, that a note from a parent will suffice for an illness for a child, as long as the child is not out for more than 5 days. That brought RMHS in alignment with Parker and a few other places. The one follow-up or caveat was we're going to go clean up the language in the policy that's out there. It's actually even just a guidebook right now to make sure that's clear about what that means, and has been a bit of a challenge of implementation at the high school. But we did not put it in here with the expectation that if it were to change or wanted to change, we could review it as a committee as part of the high school handbook or the district handbook from an adjustment perspective. And that intent stayed out of here. Otherwise, all you see here is MASC and legal adjustments, and then, as I mentioned, the previously he, she, they, parent, guardian related adjustments. And then we voted 3-0 to recommend the amendment here to the committee as a whole as well.
Okay, can we start the reading?
Student absences and excuses.
We'll move to waive the reading. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Sarah beat you to that one. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, we'll waive the reading. Any discussion tonight on that one?
I want to see real quick if I feel like there was any places that I missed.
I just looked there, I didn't see it.
Well, we can, we'll have the second reading as well. So Tom, the added stuff, if I could just summarize it, it's sort of, we sort of don't jump as quickly to giving up on a kid who's having persistent absences. Is that sort of a fair way to think about it?
Yes, but it's a legal requirement. MGL was updated to make sure that you cannot just automatically suspend or expel a student. You have to provide means to let them get back in and means to achieve additional credit and things like that. So ultimately, that's where this is, and trying to keep kids in school as much as possible. That's the intent of most of the updates.
Okay. Any other discussion for tonight on this one? Okay. We will, which one was that? JH, we'll move to JFBAD.
JFABD.
This is wrong.
Oh, it's wrong on the agenda, that's
the
okay.
agenda's wrong.
Yeah, that's okay.
We'll let that one, yeah. Homeless students, this one, what came up as part of the tiered focus monitoring review, in addition to the two that we did the secondary approval of earlier today. This one also was adjusted to match MASC and also was adjusted with legal recommendations. This one might be the one that has the student-parent thing that I think we want to clean up. So I can take that as an action if that's what the committee agrees to. This one had legal recommendations added to it. It was edited separately, and so I had to incorporate it, which is why you see all the language as mine, but it really came from legal in many cases. So it includes all of those. This one also was voted 3-0 by the subcommittee to recommend the amended committee to the full committee for adoption. And similar type things in terms of, legal requirements from an MGL updates that are happening here.
Okay, can we start the reading?
Homeless students.
Move to waive the reading.
Aaron beat you.
We're down to 2 words.
I'll give that one to Aaron. I will second.
There you go.
All right, all in favor? All opposed, 5-0, so we'll waive the reading. Any discussion on this one this evening? Tom, you'll take a second spin.
I'll take a
through
second
to see
spin
if
through to
there's
look for
something
parent
else.
guardian type things and other things like that before the final and second reading.
Okay. Okay, and then finally, from a policy perspective, finally, policy EFDA.
Policy EFDA. Okay, this one has a different intent and ask. This one came from Ms. Baton as she was going through it last year, and noticed that there were some incompliant related policies in here with regards to MGL again. And almost student shaming for not being able to pay their balances. So it is adjusted to align to legal updates. This one I don't believe has an MASC policy at all. This one is our policy standing alone. And so we have, with Susan made some first adjustments, then we sent it off to legal to make second adjustments. And then we as a policy committee added the parent guardian and other, adjustments with regards to grammar and things like that. We then voted 3-0 again to recommend this amended policy to the school committee as a whole for adoption.
Go ahead.
Unpaid meal.
Move to waive the reading. Is there a second? Seconded by Tom.
I just want to note for the record, Carla, you looked pretty pathetic on that one.
I was like, I'm supposed to read it right now.
I think you have to say at least one word before we can
Unpaid
waive it.
meal, please, somebody save me.
All right, all in favor of waiving the reading? Okay, I do have a comment on this one. Under payment options, it strikes me as problematic to list the specific vendor we use for online payments in a policy. That could change, and I don't want to have to update a policy because we changed the vendor. So I wonder if we just simplify that to say the Reading School Nutrition Department will offer an online payment option, which feels more like a policy statement to me, and then eliminate the website. Like, parents are not seeking out our policy to find the website to pay for cafeteria expenses is my gut. So I think we just simplify that so that the policy outlives any changes we might make to our vendor.
That makes sense.
I would make a slight adjustment to that.
Okay.
And just say that Reading School Nutrition Department offers an online payment option, which can be found on Reading Public Schools website.
Sure.
Same thing, but instead of will, like, it actually does exist.
Sure. Yeah.
And then go right to the we encourage.
Yeah, we would
Okay.
delete our online website is, yep.
Yep.
Okay.
As well as, I'll just.
Okay, any, well, Tom captures that, any, oh, sorry, Dr. Corum.
Jeffrey Corum, Ridge Road. I appreciate encourage the school committee to move in this direction, particularly the efforts to remove the shaming, not only lunch shaming, but also there's mention in the revised policy for activities that don't require a fee as well as graduation, which I think is a significant change to the positive. I did have a couple of questions on the donations towards student debt part. It talks about, students that had previous debt before they were determined to be eligible for the free or reduced lunch periods. One of the concerns that I heard, or something that came up, I guess, in discussions previously, was that there are some students whose families have not, who probably are eligible, but have not gone through the process to become certified as eligible, whether through stigma of being embarrassed to fill out the forms or not knowing about it or language difficulty. So I just wonder whether there's some language, after you've done the people who are certified, before you get to the 60 days wait, do you want to look at applying that debt to students that are not certified as being eligible but have some lunch debt? I think there may even be students whose parents refuse to do it, but the student says, oh, I wish we would, because, just whatever reason there is that they haven't filled out the applicable forms for that. The other question I had was what exactly happens after the 60 days and what the 60-day period is for? Can somebody not review it again 30 days after the donation was reviewed if there's some reason that you would like to apply that so that the student could then participate in some fee-based activity? And after the 60 days, if there's still if there's still money left over, does that go back to the donor? Does it get swallowed by the school nutrition department? I don't see that kind of spelled out in the policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
So regarding Dr. Corum's first comment, how would the school know that a student's lunch debt was a result of family need? I mean, my kids have gone into debt just because we didn't reload the account. I don't know how far I don't think we let them get super far into debt before. Anyway, I guess I think the point of the application is to show some evidence that the need is there. So I guess I just question how the school would know without just making major assumptions about a family's situation.
Perhaps, Sean?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
So perhaps we could add a step between 3 and 4 that says the district will notify other students with debt that there is the possibility of donation-based forgiveness if they can certify that they
I
have.
like that, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the next set, to Dr. Corum's other rest of the balance, I think 4 essentially is rinse and repeat, right? 60 days, wait, rinse and repeat. If they incur more debt, I'm going to rinse and repeat. And this just goes in an endless cycle. So the money never comes out. You just go to 4 and then you just keep rinsing and repeating is the way I interpret this. It doesn't say after 4, you're done, right? Because you go back through 1, 2, and 3 again is the way I'm reading and interpreting this. And if we need to clean up that language, or if other people agree with that and we don't think the language says that, then we can work on it.
Well, I think the language that would say that would be the balance will be held indefinitely and applied using the same process. So anytime new qualifying debt emerged.
So I don't think that's intentionally what the point is here. I think this is allowing other debts to accrue over 60 days. So if that same set of students, right, if they're gonna accrue another debt, then that donation that was given can help that same set of students again, is what number 4 is allowing it to happen. But instead of just continually paying it on a day-by-day basis, it said, let's wait for 60 days, see what accrues, and then pay off what happens over 60 days in steps 1, 2, and 3. That's the way I'm reading that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dr. Corn?
Yeah, I see what your intent there is. I guess I didn't read it that way. It said it'll be held for 60 days and then applied, with sort of the assumption that it's all going to disappear by the second time or something, without explicitly saying that, it'll go back in. But also, and you don't want to do it on a daily basis because that's a burden on those administering. But, the idea that, after 30 days, there might be some reason that you might want to apply it. And then the policy says, no, you have to wait 60 days from the time that you first ran through it. Right? So, you come, if you have a donation at 30 days before the end of school and you want to do something on the last day of school, oh, it hasn't been 60 days yet, so I can't rinse and repeat. Right? So I don't, there's something a little bit different wording there, up to 60 days or something.
Yeah.
Or, this balance will be, this procedure will be applied repeatedly, with, up to a maximum of 60 days wait between. We may not need to wordsmith this right now if we have a second reading coming up, but that was my.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, too. I mean, I would imagine we wouldn't want to say it has to be every so often and have that period be too short, because there's probably some administrative burden attached to doing this. So maybe as a takeaway, I wonder if we can, talk to Ms. Baton about this one and just understand what the right degree of flexibility is that gets at that intent of ensuring that these funds are sort of regularly, we're regularly reviewing the outstanding debt to apply any funds that might be available. It feels like that's the intent of everybody that's making comments right now, or the desired intent. So maybe we can just think about the language that captures that without being too prescriptive about the specific timing. We do have a second reading. See, this is why we needed a second reading. I knew I had.
Feeling better about not reading.
Feeling much better about not reading my email. Yes.
So this one could have been tabled, right? So I'm trying to see if we can capture the intent of that first one. I'm going to zoom in so people can see it a little bit better since it's a shared thing here in a second. So let me tie this. If monies remain from any donation after all students eligible in number 1, number 2, and number 3 are covered, the district will notify families of any other students with debt of the potential for debt forgiveness based on a donation if said families provide, what's the documentation? Dr. Milczewski?
Can demonstrate eligibility for
we could eligibility for free and reduced lunch, right?
Can demonstrate eligibility
I don't know the
for
formal name of the
free
form.
and reduced breakfast or lunch, really, right? Lunch. Meals.
Reduced.
Yeah. Dr. Milczewski, maybe how often does this happen? That we have like balances sitting out there to pay student, to pay student debt?
This is not a super common.
Yeah, okay.
Lunch is also free right now.
True.
I mean, you like, if you want second lunch, if you want water, if you want chips, there are things you can spend money on, but generally speaking, this is not the same as when
Not right
kids
now.
were paying daily, and we don't know if we're going to go back there.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I was asking
In which case, this would become very
Good point.
relevant.
Good point.
Yeah.
And this is
The
also
reason I was
donation
asking is I'm
only.
hesitant to create a bunch of new sort of administrative steps, like, okay, now let's identify all the families that have any debt and send a letter that says, hey, just in case you're eligible for free and reduced
You
price
get
lunch.
one
we've got
anyway,
some-
don't you? I mean,
What?
if you have the app, we send letters to say your account is in the negative.
Yeah, but this is adding one additional step, saying your
But do we send
your account
letters,
can
or
be
does-
forgiven.
Does my school
I think
box?
talking through it with Susan and with Catherine would be helpful too.
The district
Um,
never paid enough attention to
I
me.
mean, they're living this every
I
day.
think we have a good sense of maybe what we're trying to do, and so we can do some follow-up in between meetings to get some clarity from Susan and Catherine on how to structure this in a way that achieves those aims, but makes sense operationally as well.
Can I ask one more logistical question here, especially since breakfast was added to the most recent stuff? Is it free and reduced lunch, or is it free and reduced meals? And should we change it from lunch to meals?
On the form, I think the form, I thought it still said lunch. No, it's meals on USDA, I believe. We're just school meals, yeah.
So should we change lunch to meals across the board?
Again, I would.
Make sure you're changing it in the right places and not just.
This is for eligibility, right? So free meals.
Free and reduced price to school meals.
Meals.
It's free or reduced, it turns out, en masse. Oh, that's USDA.
Meals.
Dr. Corman.
Do you want reduced meals or reduced price meals? I mean, a reduced meal could be.
Application for free and
Oh.
reduced school meals. It's technically the full
reduced
statement.
price, yeah.
Price.
Yeah, be reduced.
Because some people get free, it's free
Well, I
and
mean,
reduced price
one and
meals.
two are differentiating between free meals and reduced price
Otherwise, it sounds like
meals.
we're giving them less
Right.
food.
Yeah.
It's
Correct.
definitely not the
The
intent.
last line in chapter 2, or number 2 should also be reduced price.
We'll make sure before we take a final vote that
It appears to be priced, not priced on like the USDA and mass definitions.
Okay, I'll fix that.
Yeah.
fun.
All right. I'm really aiming for a 10 o'clock finish here.
Eat it.
Anything else urgent before we iterate on this in between meetings?
No.
Okay. So just, did we already do the reading on this one? We already did the reading on this one, we're good. Okay, so just very quickly, just to close us out, on the social media liaison approach, I'm just curious what others think. I tend to think that the rotation of two of us every 3 months, it's difficult to sort of get momentum. And the handoffs are sometimes messy.
Or non-existent.
Or don't happen in some cases. And I wonder if, as a group, we still feel like it's working for us, or we want to think about, do one or two of us just want to raise our hand and be full-time liaisons for social media? I think that the content has worked and has been sort of consistent with what, was imagined when the policy was passed. And so I think we all have a good sense of like the appropriate things to post, and I'm not concerned about having one or two people be on the hook for that. I don't think it's a huge lift, but I think we would benefit from somebody sort of just being, one or two of us being sort of in the mode of like, this is always my responsibility and it's a habit for me. So, and I'm not doing that because I want to shirk responsibility. I'll raise my hand to be one of them if people aren't clamoring for it. But I'm curious whether others agree with that observation or not as a starting point, and then we'll figure out who it is, if so. Go ahead, Erin.
So as far as managing our own page, 100%, I think that makes sense. Like, I'm not gonna lie, all the time I'm like, do you want me to just post the meeting? Like, do you want, like, I'm like, I'm here, I'm on the page right now, like, nobody, today I realized, oh, wait, I'm on December, but nobody had posted our meeting for tonight, so I posted our meeting today. But I think originally, when we did this, we talked about when, I don't know how to word it, sticky conversations come up on other public pages, having a rotation of voices to comment as representing the school committee. Now that we're, 2.5 years into it, that has not actually come up very often, thankfully. It doesn't come up very often. So as far as like managing our page, yeah, 100%, like just give it to one or two people, and I think that can be done. We can always revisit it if there's, objection to how someone's handling it, but I guess then the question would be like, are those two also then responsible, and like what's the protocol, do they consult with the chair? Do they, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't want to just dive in and say, I'm representing the whole school committee to diffuse this conversation.
So maybe there's a hybrid, because you're right, that's a good point, that's a good distinction. Maybe there's a hybrid. I actually think it would be very easy if I just need to get in the habit of doing it. As we get the agenda finalized and posted, at a minimum, let's make sure that let's make sure that the meeting is also posted on our Facebook page, right? Like, I think that would be a very easy sort of step to build into our process of getting the agenda up, as a like sort of last chance. Maybe we just keep the rotation for those odd instances where that comes up. It's, and because, when it comes up, we tend to all be aware, like, oh, this thing's percolating, let's figure out who's on the hook to respond. So maybe we could just keep the rotation going for those odd things that pop up so that we have somebody who's on, sort of on tap to go say, hey, we're addressing this in our meeting next week, or what, those responses typically are just very sort of factual, like just to try to tamp things down a little bit. So maybe that's a bit of a hybrid approach. We'll move the posting about our events and things like that to a chair and vice chair responsibility, and then we'll keep the rotation for other stuff that tends to happen not that often.
So the only thing I would push back on is I would argue that as a group of 6, we are not all aware when conversations are coming up. So I still feel like there's been times where, like, if I notice it, who do I go to? Do I go to those 2? That's what I'm saying. Like, who do you, like, there are times where I feel like we need to get in, we need to, like, respond to this clearly, succinctly, quickly. So what's the step there? It's not my month.
So
Until you're itching to weigh in, and I want to.
No, I'm just trying to speak candidly here.
Yeah, I mean, it's all,
Yeah,
I think your candid conversation is spot on. I think the question here is, we actually have a procedure. We should go back to that procedure, pull it back up and see what we need to update. And, I have no problem with the idea that it's part of the chair, vice chair responsibility of setting the meetings and making sure that portion's taken care of. There are other things, though, and Erin's been phenomenal at it when it comes to kind of the celebration type stuff that we post on that website too, that is not so, formulaic and laid out. That's not my skill set. Somehow you find the perfect image all the time, it seems like, to celebrate whatever it is, the opening of school or something else along those lines. And I think we should go back and look at that procedure, and I have it. If nobody else does, we can pull it up. I do think it's important that we continue to rotate the voice that responds to that, though. So maybe the part of that procedure review or protocol review is to say, we need to make sure when we leave the meeting each month, okay, who's on coverage? And make sure it's kind of explicitly stated each time so people know, because I think it's off people's minds, generally. I'm guilty of that as well. But then, if something is percolating, it's just a fact that some of us are not going to be on Facebook all the time. I think that's just a known thing, right? So if somebody sees something, then okay, by the way, this is percolating. When you get a chance, go look at it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with people saying that. You're not giving any opinion. You're not doing anything else. You're just saying, this is percolating. This is where it's percolating. When you get a chance, go look at it and respond, right? And send it to those 2 people who are on that at that point in time. We can make those very clean updates, I think, to the procedure for both cases here, and then we're good to go.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Can I guess, clarifying question and maybe a point of consideration. When we say things are percolating, what groups are those in? What pages are we monitoring? Are we following? 'Cause I never go on Facebook, ever. And I've left pretty much every age that is not pertinent to me directly. So happy, if I'm the coordinator, happy to have something flagged to me, or if I stumble across it in the 2 seconds that I looked at my memories from the past 10 years, that's literally all I do on Facebook these days. See how cute my kids used to be. Helps me get through the day with teenagers. So again, I'm happy to jump on something if it's flagged to me and I'm the coordinator that month, but I'm not in most of the groups.
And I think that's fair too, because there's some splitting of some of the groups that has happened too, right? I mean, when we initially set it, and so in looking at all the research around it, we looked at groups of certain sizes. RPN is the biggest, and curriculum, parents concerned about curriculum were the two that we particularly focused on. Special education parents is out there too, Rant is out there, One Reading, Wonder Woman, Reading, whatever, who knows, there's a bunch of them, but those were kind of the two that we were focusing on as part of that process, because those are the two that most of the education-related things came up in. We can't be all places at all times. So even if we want to just specify, these are the two, because they're big enough and they're focused enough on Reading and Reading only, that maybe that'd be part of the procedure update too.
And they all will allow all 6 of us to be members. Right, which I don't think we can necessarily say about, that was part of it, we were like, we can all be part of these
Correct.
2 groups.
Right.
And
All right, so this wasn't as easy as I anticipated, so, which is fine. Let's put a pin, why don't I suggest we put a pin in it? The train's not off the tracks by any means on this, like, I'm not, losing sleep over it, I just thought we'd bring it up tonight, since we had a bunch of policy stuff anyway. I don't know where the procedure is, to be honest. I looked for it and I couldn't find it. So if you do have it and you could share it, that would be great. And we'll, we can all sort of chew on it and think about whether there are adjustments that we want to make, and we'll bring it back again at a future meeting, probably when we have a light agenda.
so we're not changing anything?
Not tonight.
Okay, I disagree
We don't
with
even
that.
have something in front of us to change tonight
Okay.
in terms of a procedure.
I would just like to be able to like put stuff up, even if, and not have to say like,
Does the procedure preclude somebody who's not the social media coordinator from
the
participating?
procedure says if it's like,
It's not your month.
if it's your month, you are the only people posting, and some people don't want to post, which is fine. You're not on Facebook, that's fine. But I am, and I'm willing to post, so I feel like why should the page not be a resource for our families?
But this month it is you, right? So if we
Yeah,
revisited this, so it's December.
It's me,
So if
Carla.
we revisit it at the
Oh,
next
Tom's got
meeting or a subsequent.
Yeah, and Tom, that's kind of how I remembered it is.
So some of this we haven't even changed, right?
Yeah, well, but the Facebook page, so the Facebook page doesn't, nobody's restricted from posting to the Facebook page per this. The social media, according to this procedure, the social media coordinators are the ones that should be the go-to when there's like something to respond to on one of those
Well,
pages.
this is the first step. One leads to two, right? And one talks about the rotation.
Note, members who do not wish to participate do
Yep.
not have to.
That's
We
correct.
have been automatically putting all 6 people in the rotation.
And that's also part of the process we can do is if people want to opt out, there is an opt-out process. When we started this, everybody opted in. Right? So if we want to say, hey, people are wanting to opt out, then you can certainly opt out, because it is an opt-in model. So that can be the next step
I don't know
immediately.
if Sarah ever opted in. I think this is our.
I don't think I ever opted in, but it's not that I'm against doing it. I just stink at it because I'm never on it. And so it doesn't ever occur to me.
Okay, Erin, you have 2 spots now.
So if you want to see like a golden retriever reel that was probably on TikTok a month ago and showed up on my Instagram and I think it's really cute, I'll repost that.
It's not educational.
Educational.
We don't even use a Twitter
Yeah.
profile, do we?
It's still there. We never got
But
everybody
don't
set
we
up on
also have a piece about being up for election?
it. Yes, and that is one of the other things I was going to raise, because
Yeah.
2 of you are coming up
What's
for
our
election.
timeline on that?
Is that once your papers are certified, you can no longer be a social media coordinator for the committee.
So you're off the
Let's
hook
do
in
rotate.
March.
February, middle of February.
February, March?
No, but Erin's rotation would be in March. That would be relevant.
Yeah, I think I took her off.
I was going to say,
Oh, it's off there already?
When I built the
Carla and
schedule,
I were not put on
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't catch that.
in the new year.
All right, so
All
I
right.
don't think there's
all
an
right.
action to take tonight. I don't read this as precluding you from posting an event to the Facebook page, but it's December
Post
anyway.
liberally.
It's December anyway, so go nuts. You have 30 more days in which to rule the world of social media. And then we'll revisit this when the opportunity arises. All right, anything else? Any final motions?
Motion to adjourn.
Aaron, is there a second? I'll
Second.
give that one to Sarah. And all in favor? All opposed? All right, we're adjourned.
8 minutes late, buddy.
I know.